A frozen moment at a Kansas train depot would shatter two lives forever. When rancher Caleb Turner arrived to collect supplies that scorching afternoon, he never imagined he'd see her again. The Tennessee girl who'd kissed him 18 years ago by a moonlit creek, then vanished without a trace. But there she stood, stepping off the westbound train with a worn carpet bag and desperate eyes. Lydia Harper, his first love, his first kiss, his first heartbreak. And she'd come to marry another man. Stay with me until the very end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these tales travel. The Kansas summer hit like a furnace blast, turning the air above the railroad tracks into shimmering waves of heat. Caleb Turner stood on the platform of the Dodge City Depot, his hat pulled low against the midday glare, waiting for a shipment of fence wire that should have arrived on the 215 from Topeka. Around him, the usual chaos swirled, drovers shouting over cattle penned near the stockyards, women with parasols stepping carefully around mud puddles left by yesterday's brief storm, children darting between legs and luggage. Caleb paid them no mind. His thoughts were on the fence line that needed mending before the herd rotation next week, on the hay that needed cutting, on the 1,000 small urgencies that filled a rancher's life. At 34, his days had settled into a rhythm as predictable as the seasons: hard work, harder ground, and the kind of solitude that stops feeling lonely once you accept it as permanent. The train whistle screamed, announcing arrival. Caleb shifted his weight, watching the massive iron beast slow with a squeal of brakes and a great hissing of steam. The locomotive was a Northern Pacific model, newer than most that came through, pulling 6 passenger cars and twice as many freight wagons. Conductors swung down before the wheels fully stopped, and immediately passengers began to disembark. Men in city suits already wilting in the heat, families with children and too much luggage, a pair of soldiers in dusty blue uniforms. Caleb's eyes moved past them all, searching for the freight supervisor. And then the world stopped. A woman stepped down from the third passenger car, gripping the handrail with one gloved hand while the other held a carpet bag that had seen better years. She wore a simple gray traveling dress, modest and practical, with her dark hair pinned up beneath a small bonnet. Nothing about her should have stood out in the crowd, but Caleb's breath caught in his throat like he'd been punched. Even at this distance, even after 18 years, even though his rational mind screamed it was impossible, he knew her. The bag nearly slipped from her fingers as she reached the platform. She set it down carefully, then straightened and looked around with the uncertain expression of someone arriving in an unfamiliar place. Her face was thinner than he remembered, more careworn, but the basic architecture of her features remained achingly familiar. The slight upturn of her nose, the way she held her shoulders, the unconscious grace in how she moved. Lydia. Lydia Harper. The girl from Tennessee. The girl who'd kissed him by Copper Creek on a summer night when they were both 16. The girl who'd disappeared from his life like morning mist when her family moved west without warning, leaving him with nothing but memories and a heart that took years to stop aching. Caleb stood frozen 20 yards away, his entire body locked in place. The noise of the depot faded to a dull roar. People moved around him like water around a stone. He couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think. The fence wire, the ranch, the cattle, everything that had filled his mind moments ago evaporated. It couldn't be her. Tennessee was 1,000 miles and a lifetime away. The Lydia he'd known would be, 32 now? Married with children, probably. Living in some eastern city or settled farm, her own life as established as his. The chances of her appearing here, in this precise place at this precise moment, were astronomical. But chance didn't change the evidence of his eyes. She turned slowly, scanning the crowd, clearly looking for someone. Her expression was anxious, hopeful, tired, the look of a traveler at the end of a long journey, searching for a familiar face in a sea of strangers. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, recognition didn't register. She looked at him the way you look at any stranger in a crowd, neutral, passing, ready to move on. Then understanding flooded her face. Her lips parted. Her hand went to her chest. The color drained from her cheeks so completely that Caleb thought she might faint. Caleb? The word was nearly inaudible across the distance, more a shape her mouth made than actual sound. His legs unlocked. He moved toward her without deciding to, cutting through the crowd with the single-minded purpose of a man in a dream. She didn't move, just stood there with her hand still pressed to her chest, eyes wide and filling with an emotion he couldn't name. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough to see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes that hadn't been there before, the small scar on her chin that was new, the way her hands trembled slightly. "Lydia Harper," he said, and his voice came out rough as gravel. "Lord above, it's really you." "Caleb Turner." Her voice was exactly as he remembered, soft, with that slight Tennessee lilt that turned vowels into music. I don't... How are you here?" "I live here, 40 miles northwest. Got a ranch." The words felt absurd, small talk in the face of the impossible. "What are you... are you... She glanced past him, searching the crowd again, and something in her expression shifted, became guarded, almost frightened. "I'm meeting someone. I didn't know you... I had no idea you were in Kansas." "Been here 11 years, Caleb said, though the information felt meaningless. 11 years, 11 minutes. Time had collapsed into this single moment. "Are you visiting family, passing through?" She opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, a rough voice called out from behind Caleb. "You the Harper woman?" Caleb turned. A man pushed through the crowd, tall, broad-shouldered, probably mid-40s, with a weathered face that spoke of years in hard weather. He wore work clothes, boots caked with dried mud, and a hat that had seen better decades. Behind him, a wagon waited at the edge of the platform, and in the wagon bed sat 2 small girls, maybe 7 and 9, with identical blonde braids and wary eyes. "Mr. Bennett?" Lydia's voice was steady, but Caleb heard the thread of tension beneath it. "That's right, Harold Bennett." The man looked her up and down with the assessing gaze of someone inspecting livestock. Not cruel exactly, but utterly without warmth. "You're smaller than I expected. Can you work?" Yes, I can work." Lydia's chin lifted slightly. "Your letter said you needed help with the house and children." "That's right. Lost my wife 2 years back. Place has gone to hell." He jerked his thumb toward the wagon. "Those are the girls, Emma and Sarah. They need a woman's hand." Caleb's mind struggled to process what he was hearing. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The anxiety in Lydia's expression, the way she'd been searching the crowd, the carpet bag with all her possessions. She wasn't visiting. She wasn't passing through. She'd come here to marry this stranger. A mail-order bride arrangement. Common enough on the frontier. Widowers and lonely men advertising for wives, desperate or adventurous women responding. Practical arrangements made through letters and hope. Caleb had known a dozen such matches. Some worked out fine. Others were disasters. But this was Lydia. His Lydia, though she'd never actually been his, not really. Just a girl who'd kissed him once on a dare from her friends, then surprised them both by kissing him again, slower, because she'd wanted to. A girl who'd sat with him by the creek for hours afterward, talking about dreams and futures until her father's voice calling her home had broken the spell. And now she stood here about to climb into a wagon with a hard-eyed stranger and 2 motherless children, heading toward a life Caleb couldn't bear to imagine. "Caleb," Lydia said softly, and he realized he'd been staring. "This is... Mr. Bennett and I have been corresponding for 3 months. I'm here to... We're going to... get married," Bennett finished bluntly. "Soon as we get the license. No point waiting." He looked at Caleb with mild curiosity. "You know her?" "We..." Caleb's throat felt tight. "We knew each other. Long time ago. Tennessee." Small world. Bennett showed no interest in pursuing the topic. He picked up Lydia's bag without asking. "Come on then. Got a long ride ahead, and I need to get back before dark. Cattle don't feed themselves." Lydia looked at Caleb, and in her eyes he saw 100 things unsaid. Surprise, regret, something that might have been an apology or a plea. But what could either of them say? What right did he have to object? She'd made her choice, traveled hundreds of miles to keep a commitment to a stranger. His own feelings, 18 years dormant and suddenly screaming back to life, meant nothing against that reality. "It was good to see you," she said quietly. "You too." The lie tasted bitter. Nothing about this was good. Everything about it was wrong in ways he couldn't articulate. She walked toward the wagon. Bennett helped her up to the seat with perfunctory efficiency, then climbed up beside her. The two girls in back stared at Lydia with the same assessing wariness their father had shown. "Welcome, the older one, Emma probably, said with careful politeness. "Thank you," Lydia replied. "I'm very happy to meet you both." The wagon creaked into motion. Caleb stood frozen as it rolled away, joining the flow of traffic leaving the depot. He watched until it turned a corner and disappeared behind the railroad office, watched until even the dust it raised had settled, watched until standing there alone made him look like a fool. Only then did he realize the freight supervisor had been calling his name for the past 2 minutes, asking him to sign for the wire delivery. That night, Caleb sat on the porch of his cabin 40 miles northwest of Dodge City, staring at nothing. The ranch was modest, 160 acres of decent grazing land, a creek that ran year-round, a small herd of cattle he'd built up slowly over a decade. The cabin was solid, built with his own hands from lumber he'd milled himself. 2 rooms, a good stove, furniture that was functional, if not fancy. He'd always thought of it as enough, a good life for a man alone. Now it felt empty in a way it never had before. The stars came out, brilliant and cold. Somewhere out there in the darkness, Lydia was settling into Bennett's ranch, meeting her new reality. Caleb tried to imagine it and couldn't. His mind kept circling back to Tennessee, to Copper Creek, to the girl who'd laughed at something he'd said and then kissed him quiet. He'd been 16, working his father's farm, already tall but not yet filled out, awkward in his skin. Lydia had been the minister's daughter, pretty and bright and surrounded by boys who courted her openly. Caleb had admired her from afar, never imagining she'd notice him. But one evening, after a church social, he'd wandered down to the creek to escape the crowd, and she'd followed him. Her friends had dared her to kiss him, she admitted with a mischievous smile. So she did. A quick peck that barely counted. Then she'd paused, looking at him with an expression he couldn't read. "Can I try that again?" she'd asked. "Why?" "Because I want to do it properly this time." The second kiss had been slow, exploratory, sweet with the taste of the strawberry preserves she'd eaten at the social. When they'd finally pulled apart, both breathless, she'd laughed at the stunned expression on his face. They'd sat by the creek until moonrise, talking. She told him about her dream of seeing the West. He told her about wanting to have his own land someday, not just work his father's. They made no promises. They were 16. They barely knew each other beyond church attendance and shared glances. But something had passed between them that night, something that felt important and real. 2 weeks later, her father announced the family was moving to Missouri. Church business. They left within days. Caleb had tried to find her over the years. He'd written letters to her father's church in Missouri, but they'd moved on from there too, and the trail went cold. Eventually, he'd accepted that she was gone, that teenage romance was just that. Teenage, temporary, a sweet memory to carry, but not to build a life on. He'd moved west himself at 23, worked on various ranches, saved his money, finally bought this land. There had been other women over the years, a few dances, a brief courtship with a saloon owner's daughter in Abilene that ended amicably when she realized he'd never leave the ranch and she'd never stay. Nothing that went deep. Nothing that lasted. He told himself he was content. Now, sitting in the dark with Lydia Harper back in his world, but more unreachable than ever, he realized content had just been another word for resigned. 3 days passed. Caleb tried to work. He mended the fence line, moved the cattle to better grazing, repaired a section of barn roof that had been leaking. Physical labor usually settled his mind, gave him the satisfaction of problems solved and tasks completed. Now it just filled hours that stretched too long. On the 4th day, he rode into Dodge City for supplies. He told himself it was necessary. He needed grain, ammunition, a few other items. The ride wasn't about hoping to see her again, hoping to confirm she was all right. Hoping. He didn't know what he was hoping. The general store was busy. Caleb gathered his supplies mechanically, barely seeing what he put in his basket. He was paying when he heard 2 women talking near the fabric display. "Did you see Harold Bennett's new wife?" one asked. Caleb's hand stilled on his change. "I did. the second woman replied. Poor thing. She looks capable enough, but Lord knows what she's gotten herself into. That man hasn't drawn a sober breath in 2 years, not since Margaret died. The girls seemed taken with her, at least. I saw them in here yesterday, and little Sarah was holding her hand like she'd found a treasure. Well, she'll need friends among the children. Harold's not the friendliest sort when he's drinking, and he's always drinking. Caleb walked out before he heard more. The words rang in his head as he loaded supplies into his saddlebags. Harold Bennett was a drunk. Of course he was. Men didn't generally advertise for wives when they were pleasant, prosperous, and easy to be around. They advertised when they were desperate, when no local woman would have them. And Lydia had traveled 1,000 miles to walk into that life. He mounted his horse, intending to ride home. Instead, he turned northwest, toward the remote stretch of prairie where Bennett's ranch lay. The Bennett place sat in a shallow valley about 15 miles outside Dodge City, accessible by a rutted wagon track that barely deserved the name road. Caleb approached slowly as the sun started its descent, telling himself he was a fool with every step his horse took. What was he going to do? Knock on the door and check if she was being treated well? She was Bennett's fiancée, soon to be his wife. Caleb had no claim, no right, no reason to interfere beyond an 18-year-old memory and feelings that shouldn't matter. But he kept riding. The ranch came into view as he crested a low rise. It was worse than he'd imagined. The house was barely more than a large cabin, weathered and listing slightly to one side. The barn looked more solid but desperately needed repairs. A few scrawny cattle grazed in a corral. The whole place had the air of something sliding toward ruin, held back only by the barest maintenance. Caleb dismounted at the edge of the property, uncertain. Smoke rose from the chimney. He could hear voices, children laughing, which was something. Then Lydia appeared around the corner of the house, carrying a bucket of water from the well. She froze when she saw him. For a long moment, they just stared at each other across 30 yards of dusty ground. Then she set the bucket down carefully and walked toward him, glancing once over her shoulder at the house. "Caleb," she said when she reached him, "what are you doing here?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I heard people talking in town about Bennett, about his drinking." Her expression closed. "That's not your concern, isn't it?" "No." But her voice lacked conviction. "I made a commitment. I came here knowing what I was getting into. A widower with children who needed help. I'm not some naive girl expecting romance." "What are you expecting?" She looked away. "A roof? Food? Purpose? That's more than I had in St. Louis." St. Louis. So that's where she'd been. Caleb wanted to ask 1,000 questions. What had brought her there? What had driven her to answer Bennett's advertisement? Whether she'd thought of him at all over the years. But those questions had no place here. "The girls," Lydia continued, her voice softening. "Emma and Sarah. They're sweet children, Caleb. Lonely and scared and desperately in need of kindness. If I can give them that, if I can make their lives a little better, then this is worthwhile." "And what about your life?" "My life is my own choice." "Is it?" He couldn't keep the edge from his voice. "Or did circumstances back you into a corner where this seemed like the only option?" She met his eyes then, and he saw anger flash there. But underneath it, something raw and true. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't make this harder than it already is. Don't stand here judging choices you know nothing about. I'm 32 years old, Caleb. I'm not the girl you kissed by a creek anymore. That person is gone." I don't believe that." "Believe what you want." She turned to go, then paused. "Thank you for your concern, but please, don't come back here. It's better if you don't." "Lydia, please." The word broke something in him. He nodded once, mounted his horse, and rode away without looking back. But her face haunted him the entire ride home. 2 weeks crawled by. Caleb threw himself into work with an intensity that bordered on violent. He cleared new land, built a new section of corral, repaired things that didn't need repairing. His hands blistered and bled. His muscles screamed. He welcomed the pain. It was simpler than the ache in his chest. He stayed away from Dodge City, stayed away from any place he might hear news about the Bennett Ranch. If he didn't know, he couldn't worry. If he couldn't worry, maybe he could sleep without dreaming about Lydia's tired eyes and thin smile. It didn't work. On the 15th day, one of his neighbors, a tough old rancher named Mackenzie, rode up around noon. "Heard you know Harold Bennett's new woman," Mackenzie said without preamble. Caleb's jaw tightened. Why? Because Bennett was in town last night, drunk as sin, bragging about how he'd gotten himself a wife for the cost of a train ticket. Said some other things, too. Ugly things. Nearly got himself punched by the marshal. Is she all right? Don't know. But I thought you should know what kind of man she's tied herself to. Mackenzie spat tobacco juice into the dust. None of my business, I suppose. But if she was a friend of yours... He left the sentence unfinished, tipped his hat, and rode away. Caleb stood in his yard, hands clenched into fists, fighting the urge to saddle his horse and ride straight to Bennett's ranch. What good would it do? Lydia had made her choice. She'd asked him not to come back. But 18 years ago, he'd let her slip away without fighting for her, without even trying. He'd been 16, powerless, confused by the sudden departure. He could forgive himself that. What would he forgive himself for now, at 34, if he stood by and did nothing? He was saddling his horse when he heard hoofbeats approaching. 2 riders came into view, a man and a woman, traveling fast. As they got closer, Caleb recognized the man as Doc Pritchard from Dodge City. His stomach dropped. "Turner," Pritchard called. "Thank God you're here. I was hoping to find you home." "What's wrong?" The woman dismounted. She was young, maybe 18, and Caleb vaguely recognized her from town. "It's Mrs. Harper," she said breathlessly. "She sent me to fetch the doctor. One of Bennett's girls is hurt, fell from the hayloft." "Is she alive?" "Yes, but her leg's bad broken. Mrs. Harper's with her, but Bennett rode to town for whiskey and hasn't come back. She's alone out there with both children and no help." Caleb was on his horse before Pritchard finished speaking. "Let's go." They rode hard. The sun was setting when they reached Bennett's ranch, painting the ramshackle buildings in blood-red light. Caleb dismounted before his horse fully stopped and ran to the house. The door was unlocked. Inside, Lydia knelt beside a rough bed where one of the girls, Sarah, the younger one, lay pale and sweating. Her left leg was clearly broken, bent at an unnatural angle. The older girl, Emma, sat in a corner crying quietly. Lydia looked up when Caleb entered. Relief flooded her face. "Thank God," she breathed. "I didn't know if Amy would find help in time." Pritchard pushed past Caleb, medical bag in hand. "Let me see her, Mrs. Harper." "It's just Miss Harper," Lydia corrected softly, then stepped back to give the doctor room. Caleb moved to Emma, crouched beside her. "Hey there. Your sister's going to be fine. Doc Pritchard's the best there is." Emma looked at him with huge, frightened eyes. "Papa left. He got mad when Sarah fell, and he just left. It's all right. You've got help now." He glanced at Lydia. She was watching Pritchard work, her face pale but composed. The girl, Amy, stood uncertainly by the door. "Thank you, Amy," Lydia said. "You did perfectly. Can you stay a bit longer? I might need help." "Yes, ma'am." Pritchard worked quickly, examining the break, his face grim. "It's a bad fracture, but clean. I can set it, but she'll need careful watching for infection. Someone needs to stay with her." "I will," Lydia said immediately. "You'll need help. This isn't a one-person job." "I'll help," Caleb heard himself say. Lydia's eyes met his. In them he saw exhaustion, fear, and something else. Gratitude mixed with resignation, as if she'd known it would come to this eventually. "All right," she said quietly. Setting the bone was brutal. Sarah screamed despite the laudanum Pritchard administered. Emma hid her face in Lydia's skirt, sobbing. Caleb held the girl's shoulders steady while Pritchard worked, hating every second of her pain but knowing it was necessary. Finally it was done. The leg was splinted and wrapped. Sarah drifted into drugged sleep, her face still tear-stained. "She'll need to stay still for weeks," Pritchard said, washing his hands in a basin. "Absolute rest, no weight on that leg. And someone needs to watch for fever, swelling, any signs the bone's not setting right." "I understand," Lydia said. "Where's Bennett?" "In town. Drinking, I assume." Pritchard's expression darkened. I heard about his behavior last night. Mrs. Harper. Miss Harper. Miss Harper. You're not married to this man yet. If you wanted to reconsider, where would I go? Her voice was matter-of-fact, not bitter. I have no money, no family nearby. I came here with a contract, an agreement. I intend to honor it. Even if he doesn't deserve your honor? Lydia didn't answer. Pritchard sighed, packed his bag. I'll come back tomorrow to check on her. If anything changes before then, fever, excessive pain, anything, send for me immediately, day or night. Thank you, doctor. After Pritchard and Amy left, silence filled the cabin. Emma had finally fallen asleep, curled up on a chair. Sarah's breathing was steady but shallow. Lydia moved around the room mechanically, tidying things that didn't need tidying, unable to be still. Caleb watched her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Sit down before you fall down." "I'm fine." "Lydia." She stopped, her hands gripping the back of a chair. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't be kind to me. I can handle everything else, but if you're kind—" Her voice cracked. "I might break." He crossed the room in 3 strides and took her hands. They were ice cold despite the warm evening. "When did you eat last?" he asked. "I don't— This morning, I think." "There's stew in that pot. It's probably terrible, but it's food. Sit, eat." "Caleb, I'm not being kind. I'm being practical. You're no good to those girls if you collapse from exhaustion." She let him guide her to a chair. He ladled stew into a bowl. It was indeed terrible, burned and oversalted. But she ate mechanically, the way you eat when you've forgotten food has taste. Caleb sat across from her watching. The cabin was even more depressing from inside. Shabby furniture, dirt floor, walls that needed chinking, a few sad attempts at decoration, wildflowers in a jar, an embroidered cloth on the table that were clearly Lydia's doing. "How long have you been here?" he asked. 16 days. It felt like a lifetime, her tone suggested. "The girls like you. They're starving for affection. Any woman would do." "I don't think that's true." She set down her spoon. "What do you want me to say, Caleb? That this is awful? That I made a terrible mistake? I know it is, and I might have, but I'm here now, and those children need someone, and I'm all they've got." "You don't have to be." "Yes, I do." Her eyes were fierce. "You don't understand. I came here with nothing. In St. Louis, I was a seamstress, barely scraping by. When that position ended, I had 2 choices. Find a worse position, in a worse situation, or take a chance on something different. I chose this. I chose hope over despair, even if the hope is thin. There are other choices. Not for me. Not anymore." She stood abruptly. "It's late. You should go. I'm not leaving you alone here with Bennett, likely to come back drunk." "It's not your place to protect me." "Maybe not, but I'm staying anyway." They stared at each other. Outside, night had fully fallen. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. Finally, Lydia's shoulders sagged. "Fine, but sleep in the barn. If Harold comes back and finds you in the house, I'll be in the barn." He gathered some blankets and headed outside. The barn was marginally better than the house. Cleaner, at least, with the honest smell of hay and horses. He made a rough bed in an empty stall, but sleep was impossible. Around midnight, he heard a wagon approaching. Bennett returning. Caleb stayed hidden but watched through the barn door as the man staggered from the wagon, clearly drunk, and stumbled into the house. Raised voices. Bennett shouting. Lydia's quieter tones trying to calm him. Then silence. Caleb's hands clenched. Every instinct screamed at him to intervene. But Lydia had asked him not to, and barging in would only make things worse. He didn't sleep that night, just lay in the dark, listening, ready to move if needed. Dawn came gray and cold. Lydia emerged from the house as the sun rose, her face drawn and exhausted. She saw Caleb standing by the barn and walked over. "He passed out," she said flatly. "Didn't even check on Sarah. Just ranted about the doctor's bill and how useless women were, then collapsed in his bed." Caleb said nothing. What was there to say? "You should go home," Lydia continued. "Thank you for staying, but there's no reason—" I'll stay until Pritchard comes back to check on Sarah. Caleb, I'll stay. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. There's coffee inside. It's not good, but it's hot. They sat on the porch, drinking terrible coffee and watching the sun climb. Inside, they could hear Bennett snoring. The girls were still asleep. Tell me about St. Louis, Caleb said finally. If you want to. Lydia was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, after we left Tennessee, my family moved 5 times in 8 years. My father couldn't hold a congregation. He meant well, but he had no talent for it. By the time I was 24, both my parents had died. Fever. I had no siblings, no family, so I went to St. Louis because it was big and I thought I could disappear into it, make a life for myself. Disappear? From being the minister's daughter, from expectations, from memories. She glanced at him. I worked as a seamstress for 7 years. It was fine. Not happy, not sad, just existing. Then the woman who owned the shop died. Her daughter sold it, and I was let go. I had enough savings for 2 months' rent, that's all. So you answered Bennett's advertisement. I answered 3 advertisements. His was the first to respond. She laughed bitterly. Lucky me. Lydia, you could... Don't. She cut him off. Don't offer me rescue. I'm not a damsel in distress, Caleb. I'm a woman who made a choice, and I have to live with it. The girls need me. That has to be enough. Before he could respond, Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. How's Sarah? Lydia asked immediately, her whole demeanor shifting to gentle warmth. Still sleeping. Her leg hurts, but she's not crying anymore. That's good. Are you hungry? Yes, ma'am. Come on then. Let's make breakfast. They went inside, leaving Caleb alone on the porch with his cooling coffee and tangled thoughts. Pritchard arrived mid-morning. His examination of Sarah was thorough and reassuring. The bone was setting well, no signs of infection. She just needed rest and time. Keep her still, keep her comfortable, he instructed. I'll check back in 3 days. After the doctor left, Caleb knew he should go. He'd done what he came to do, confirmed Lydia and the girls were as safe as they could be under the circumstances. Staying longer would only complicate things. But Bennett was still passed out in his room, and the thought of leaving Lydia alone to manage both children and a drunk made Caleb's stomach turn. I could help with some repairs, he heard himself say. That barn roof has holes. The corral fence is falling apart. Lydia looked at him. Why? Because they need doing. That's not what I mean. He met her eyes. I know what you meant. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, fix the corral. It's dangerous for the horses. He spent the day working. Emma helped, handing him tools and nails with the serious concentration of a child glad to have a task. Sarah called advice from her bed near the window, where Lydia had moved her so she could see outside. It felt almost normal, almost peaceful. Then late afternoon came, and Bennett woke. The man emerged from the house like a bear from hibernation, angry, disoriented, and looking for something to blame for his hangover. His eyes landed on Caleb. Who the hell are you, and what are you doing on my property? Caleb straightened slowly. Name's Caleb Turner. I helped when Sarah got hurt. That was yesterday. Why are you still here? I'm fixing your corral. Bennett's eyes narrowed. I didn't ask for any fixing. No charge, just being neighborly. I don't need charity from strangers. He turned toward the house. Lydia, get out here. She appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. Yes? Why is this man on my property? He helped when Sarah was injured. I asked him to stay in case we needed to send for the doctor again. The doctor's been. Girl's fine. Time for him to leave. Mr. Bennett, he's helping repair. I said it's time for him to leave. Bennett's voice rose dangerously. Unless there's some other reason you want him around. The implication was ugly. Lydia's face went white. There's no reason, Caleb said quickly, before she could respond. I'll go. He gathered his tools, acutely aware of Bennett's hostile stare. As he mounted his horse, Emma ran out. Thank you, Mr. Turner, she called, for helping Sarah and fixing the fence. You're welcome, sweetheart. He rode away, glancing back once. Lydia stood on the porch, her arms wrapped around herself, watching him go with an expression that made his chest ache. 5 days passed. Caleb tried to focus on his ranch, his work, his normal life. He failed spectacularly. On the 6th day, he broke. He rode to Dodge City, tied his horse outside the marshal's office, and walked inside. Marshal Tom Garrett looked up from his desk. "Turner, don't usually see you in town twice in 1 month. I need to ask about Harold Bennett." Garrett's expression soured. "What about him? What kind of man is he? Honestly." The marshal leaned back in his chair. "You asking as a potential business partner or something else?" "Something else." "Then I'll tell you straight, he's a mean drunk with a temper, and he's been getting worse since his wife died. I've hauled him in twice for brawling. Only reason I haven't hauled him in more is his kids. Hate to see them lose both parents." "Has he ever hurt them?" "Not that I know of, but neglect's a kind of hurt, isn't it?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "He's got a woman out there now, fiancée. She came to marry him." "I heard. Poor woman. She know what she's getting into?" "She's starting to figure it out." Garrett studied him. "You got a personal interest in this situation, Turner?" "Maybe." "Well, I can't do anything unless she files a complaint or he breaks the law in a way I can prove. And even then," he shrugged. "She came here voluntarily, made an agreement. Law sees that as binding unless there's violence. And if there is violence, then she should come to me. But most don't." Garrett's expression was grim. "Most figure they made their bed, they have to lie in it, especially if they've got nowhere else to go." Caleb left the office feeling worse than when he'd entered. He was unlocking his horse when he heard a familiar voice. "Mr. Turner?" He turned. Amy, the young woman who'd fetched the doctor, stood there with a basket of laundry. "Amy?" She glanced around nervously. "I probably shouldn't say anything, but I was out at the Bennett place yesterday, dropping off some mending Miss Harper, did for my mother. Is she all right?" She's not happy, sir. I don't think she's safe there." Amy bit her lip. Mr. Bennett was drunk again, yelling. The girls were scared. Miss Harper was trying to calm everyone down, but I could tell she was frightened too. "Did he hurt anyone?" "Not that I saw. But he threw things, broke dishes, and the way he looked at her." Amy shuddered. "My pa says I shouldn't go back there, says it's not safe for a young woman." After Amy left, Caleb stood on the street, wrestling with himself. He had no claim on Lydia, no right to interfere. She'd made her choice, and she'd asked him to stay away. But that was before he'd seen how bad Bennett truly was, before he'd heard the fear in Amy's voice, before he'd understood that staying away might mean abandoning Lydia to something dangerous. He rode northwest toward Bennett's ranch, with the sun setting behind him and no clear plan beyond reaching her. He arrived after dark. The cabin glowed with lamplight. Through the window he could see Lydia moving around inside, cleaning up what looked like the remnants of a meal. Caleb dismounted quietly, leading his horse to the barn. Inside he found Bennett's horse missing. The man was gone, probably to town again. He was crossing the yard toward the house when the door opened. Lydia stood silhouetted against the light. "I heard a horse," she said. Then she recognized him. "Caleb, you shouldn't be here." "I know. If Harold comes back, I'll deal with Harold." She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "The girls are asleep. We should talk quietly." Inside, the cabin showed signs of recent chaos. Broken crockery swept into a corner, an overturned chair, scorch marks on the table where something hot had been thrown. Lydia saw him looking. "He had a bad day," she said flatly. "Cattle got loose. He blamed me somehow, said I distracted him by asking for money for groceries." "Did he hurt you?" "No, he yelled, threw things, then left. It's fine." "It's not fine. It's what I have." Her voice shook slightly. "This is what I have, Caleb. I can't leave. I have no money, nowhere to go. And even if I did, I made a promise to those girls. They've already lost one mother. I can't abandon them too." "You're not their mother." "Not yet, but I could be. If I stay. If I make this work." "At what cost?" She turned away. "Whatever it takes." Caleb moved closer. "Lydia, listen to me. You don't owe Bennett anything. You don't owe this place anything. You came here in good faith, but he's not holding up his end of any bargain. You have every right to walk away." "And go where?" She spun to face him. "Back to St. Louis with no job and no references? Wander from town to town hoping someone will take pity on a 32-year-old spinster? Live on the streets? Come with me." The words hung in the air between them. Lydia stared at him. "What?" "Come to my ranch. You and the girls. All of you." The words came faster now, gaining momentum. "I have room. I have land. I can protect you. You can work as my housekeeper if you need to feel like you're earning your keep. But honestly, I don't care about that. I can't leave you here, Lydia. I can't ride away knowing what you're facing." "You're asking me to run away with you. I'm asking you to save yourself. By ruining my reputation? By stealing another man's fiancée and children? Caleb, we'd be pariahs. You'd lose standing in the community. I'd be labeled a fallen woman, and the girls would be safe." Would they? Or would they just trade one kind of instability for another? "It wouldn't be unstable. I have a good ranch, a solid home, and what would I be to you?" Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "What would this arrangement be? Am I a charity case, a housekeeper, or something else?" The question stopped him cold. What would she be? The girl he'd kissed 18 years ago and never forgotten? A woman he barely knew anymore, but whose presence made his heart race? Someone he wanted to protect out of old affection, or something deeper, more dangerous? "I don't know," he admitted. "I just know I can't watch you stay here and suffer." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "You're making this so much harder." "Good. It should be hard. Staying here shouldn't be easy. But leaving would be impossible." A tear spilled over, tracked down her cheek. "Don't you see? I'm trapped. Not by law or force, but by circumstance, by having no good choices. This might be a bad situation, but at least it's a situation I chose. If I run away with you, I'm just proving I can't stand on my own, that I need rescuing, that I'm weak. Accepting help isn't weakness." "No?" Her laugh was bitter. "Then why does it feel like surrender?" Before Caleb could answer, they heard hoofbeats approaching. Lydia's face went pale. "He's back. You have to go. Now." "I'm not leaving you alone with him. Please." She grabbed his arm. "Please, Caleb. If he finds you here, it'll be worse. So much worse. Just go." The desperation in her voice decided him. He moved toward the back door as Bennett's wagon creaked to a stop outside. In the doorway, he turned back. "I'm not giving up on you." "You should," she whispered, "for both our sakes." Then she pushed him gently out the door and closed it. Caleb made it to the barn just as Bennett staggered into the house. Through the walls, he heard the man's voice, slurred and angry, though he couldn't make out words. Lydia responded in calming tones. No sounds of violence, no screams. Caleb waited in the darkness, every muscle tense, ready to charge in if needed. But the house grew quiet. Eventually the lamp went out. Still Caleb waited. The moon rose, casting silver light across the ramshackle ranch. An owl hunted in the distance. The night grew cold. Only when he was certain Bennett had passed out did Caleb mount his horse and ride away. But as he crossed the prairie toward his own ranch, one certainty crystallized in his mind. This couldn't continue. One way or another, something had to change. And soon. The following week brought rain, hard, driving sheets that turned the prairie into a muddy quagmire and kept most sensible people indoors. Caleb worked through it anyway, driving himself with a ferocity that bordered on punishment. He repaired fence lines that could have waited, moved cattle through conditions that made the animals balk, rode to town for supplies he didn't urgently need just to have somewhere to go, besides his own increasingly suffocating thoughts. Mackenzie stopped by on the 5th day of rain, water streaming from his hat brim as he dismounted under the barn overhang. "You trying to kill yourself or just your horse?" the old rancher asked, eyeing Caleb's mud-splattered appearance. "Working. There's working and there's running. You're running," Mackenzie spat. "Heard Bennett's woman is still out there. Thought maybe you'd have done something about that by now." Caleb's hands stilled on the saddle he'd been cleaning. "Like what?" "Like whatever a man does when he sees a woman in trouble and gives a damn about it." "She asked me not to interfere." "And you always do what women ask?" Mackenzie's laugh was harsh. Son, sometimes what people ask for and what they need are two different things. That woman needs help whether she wants to admit it or not. I offered. She refused. Then offer harder. After Mackenzie left, Caleb stood in the barn doorway watching rain hammer the prairie into submission. Offer harder. As if it were that simple. As if Lydia's pride in circumstances could be overcome with simple persistence. But maybe Mackenzie was right. Maybe Caleb had been too willing to accept her refusal, too quick to respect boundaries that were really just walls she'd built to protect herself from disappointment. The rain broke the next morning, leaving the world washed clean and gleaming. Caleb saddled his horse with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in days. He didn't have a plan exactly, but he had direction. That was something. He was halfway to Bennett's ranch when he encountered Doc Pritchard on the road, his buggy wheels caked with mud. "Turner," the doctor called, pulling his horse to a stop. "Good timing. I was going to send word to you." Caleb's stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "Nothing immediate. I just came from checking on the Bennett girl, Sarah. Legs healing well. But while I was there, Pritchard paused, choosing words carefully. "Miss Harper asked me to examine her. Said she'd been feeling poorly." "Is she sick?" "Not in the way you're thinking. She's exhausted, Turner. Bone-deep tired. Not eating enough, not sleeping, working herself into the ground trying to manage that household and keep Bennett's temper from exploding." The doctor's expression was grave. "I've seen this before. Women in impossible situations, holding everything together through sheer will until their bodies just give out. She's heading that direction fast." "What did you tell her?" "I told her she needs rest, proper food, and less stress. Might as well have told her she needs to sprout wings and fly. She just nodded and asked what tonic I could give her for energy." Pritchard shook his head. "She won't leave on her own, Turner. She's too stubborn and too convinced she has nowhere to go. Someone's going to have to make the decision for her. She won't thank me for it. Maybe not at first, but she'll be alive to be angry, which is better than the alternative." After Pritchard drove on, Caleb sat his horse in the middle of the muddy road, wrestling with the weight of the doctor's words. Make the decision for her. Take away her choice in the name of protecting her. Everything in him rebelled against it. Lydia wasn't a child or a possession to be managed. She was a grown woman who'd made her own choices, however limited they might be. What right did he have to override her will, even for her own good? But then he thought of her face in the lamplight, thin and strained. Thought of the tremor in her hands, the shadows under her eyes. The way she'd looked at him with desperate hope before slamming the door shut on possibility. Sometimes what people ask for and what they need are two different things. He rode on. The Bennett ranch looked worse after the rain, the house sagging more noticeably, the yard a swamp of mud and standing water. Caleb approached cautiously, unsure what he'd find. Bennett's wagon was gone at least. Small mercy. He knocked on the door and waited. Footsteps inside. Then Lydia opened it. The sight of her hit him like a fist. Pritchard hadn't exaggerated. She looked hollowed out, her cheekbones too prominent, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. She wore a simple brown dress that hung loose on her frame, and her hands gripped the doorframe as if she needed the support. "Caleb?" Her voice was flat. "I thought I made it clear. I know what you said. I'm not here to argue about it." He met her eyes. "I just came to check if you and the girls need anything. Supplies, repairs, anything I can help with that won't cause trouble." She studied him warily, looking for ulterior motives. Finally, she sighed. "The well rope frayed. I've been hauling water with a bucket on a stick, but it's slow going. If you could replace it, consider it done. Anything else?" "The roof leaks in 3 places. I've got pots under them, but I'll patch it." "Caleb, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." He kept his tone light, casual, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "Let me get my tools." He spent the rest of the day working. Lydia kept her distance at first, watching from the house with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. But gradually she relaxed, even brought him water and bread at midday. "The girls are doing better," she offered as he ate. "Sarah's walking with a crutch now. Emma's teaching her letters." "That's good. They ask about you. Wonder when the nice man who fixed the fence is coming back." "Well, now they know?" Lydia was quiet for a moment. Why are you really here, Caleb? I told you, to help. People don't help for free. Everyone wants something. The cynicism in her voice made his chest ache. Maybe I just want to see you smile again, the way you used to, by the creek. Her expression closed. That girl is gone. You keep saying that. I keep not believing it. Before she could respond, they heard a wagon approaching. Lydia's face went white. He's back early. You need to— No. Caleb stood, facing the road. I'm done hiding in your barn and sneaking around. If Bennett has a problem with me helping repair his property, he can say it to my face. Caleb, please, it'll only make things worse. But Bennett's wagon was already rolling into the yard. The man pulled the horses to a stop and climbed down, his movements steady. For once, he appeared to be sober. Somehow, that was more frightening than his drunkenness. Turner, Bennett's voice was cold. Thought I told you to stay away from my property. Miss Harper asked me to repair the well rope. Just being neighborly. That right? Bennett turned to Lydia. You asked him here? She lifted her chin, though Caleb could see her hands trembling. The well rope broke. We needed water. I asked for help. And you couldn't wait for me to fix it? You've been gone since yesterday morning. Bennett's jaw tightened. Watch your tone. I'm not using a tone. I'm stating a fact. You're questioning my authority in my own home. This isn't my home yet, Lydia said quietly. You've made that very clear. The tension crackled between them. Caleb positioned himself slightly between Lydia and Bennett, ready to intervene if needed. Bennett noticed. His eyes narrowed. You sleeping with him? What? Lydia's voice was sharp with shock. Simple question. Are you sleeping with Turner? Is that why he keeps sniffing around here like a dog in heat? How dare you? Answer the question. No. Lydia's face flushed with anger and humiliation. I barely know him. He's just someone who's been kind when no one else bothered to be. Kind. Bennett spat the word like a curse. Men aren't kind without expecting something in return. What's he expecting, Lydia? What have you promised him? Caleb stepped forward. That's enough, Bennett. This is my property. I'll say what I damn well please. You'll show respect to the woman you supposedly want to marry. Or what? Bennett moved closer, and Caleb could smell the whiskey on him after all. Not drunk, but not sober either. You'll make me? You'll ride in here and play hero? Take my woman and my kids and set up house like some kind of savior? I'm not your woman, Lydia said sharply. We're not married. I can leave any time I choose. With what money? Going where? Bennett's laugh was ugly. You've got nothing, sweetheart. Nowhere to go, no one to take you in. You made a deal with me, and you're going to stick to it. A deal requires both parties to hold up their end. What exactly have you held up? You drink away what little money you have. You leave your children to fend for themselves. You barely maintain this place. What am I getting out of this arrangement besides a roof that leaks and a man who treats me like property? The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Caleb saw Bennett's fist clench and moved without thinking, putting himself fully between them. You need to step back, Caleb said quietly. Get off my land. Not until I know she's safe. Safe? Bennett's face twisted. You think I'd hurt her? I've never laid a hand on a woman in my life. There's more than one way to hurt someone. For a long moment they stood there, two men on the edge of violence. Then Emma appeared in the doorway, her small voice cutting through the tension. Papa? Is everything all right? Bennett's expression shifted, softened slightly. It's fine, baby girl. Go back inside. But Mr. Turner is here. I wanted to thank him for fixing the well. You can thank him from inside. Go on now. Emma retreated reluctantly. The interruption seemed to drain the immediate danger from the situation. Bennett stepped back, but his eyes remained hard. I want you gone, he said to Caleb, and I don't want you coming back. My fiancée doesn't need help from strangers. If she asks me to leave, I will. They both turned to Lydia. She stood very still, her arms wrapped around herself, caught between impossible choices. Her eyes met Caleb's, and he saw the battle raging behind them, pride versus need, independence versus safety, what she wanted versus what she could have. Go, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, Caleb, just go. It felt like a knife between his ribs, but he nodded once, gathered his tools, and walked to his horse. As he mounted, he looked back at her one more time. If you need me, he said, I'm 40 miles northwest. Anytime, day or night. You or the girls. Remember that. He rode away without waiting for a response, but he felt her eyes on him until he crested the first rise and dropped out of sight. That night, lying in his own bed, staring at the ceiling, Caleb made a decision. He couldn't force Lydia to leave, couldn't make her choices for her, no matter how much he wanted to. But he could make sure she knew she had options, real, concrete options that didn't depend on fairy tales or impossible dreams. The next morning, he rode to Dodge City and walked into the First Kansas Bank. The manager, a thin man named Holloway, looked up from his desk. Mr. Turner, don't usually see you in town this much. Everything all right with your ranch? Ranch is fine. I need to make some arrangements. What kind of arrangements? I want to set up an account, a separate one from my own, put $500 in it. Holloway's eyebrows rose. $500 was serious money. For what purpose? For a woman named Lydia Harper. She's currently at Harold Bennett's place, but she might need access to funds independently. Can you do that? I can set up an account in her name, certainly, but she'll need to come in herself to access it. That's fine. I just need her to know it's there, that she has money if she needs to leave. Understanding dawned in Holloway's expression. I see. And if Bennett finds out about this? He won't. Not from you or me. This stays between us and Miss Harper. You're putting a lot of trust in a woman you barely know. I know her well enough. The transaction took an hour, paperwork signed and countersigned. When it was done, Caleb had a letter for Lydia explaining the account, the amount, and how she could access it. He sealed it carefully. How will you get this to her without Bennett seeing? Holloway asked. Good question. Caleb thought for a moment, then headed to the general store. The owner's wife, Mrs. Patterson, was known for her discretion and her soft heart. I need a favor, Caleb told her, and it needs to stay quiet. Mrs. Patterson listened to his explanation, then nodded slowly. I deliver supplies to the Bennett place every Friday. I can slip her the letter when Harold's not looking, but Mr. Turner, are you sure about this? $500 is your life savings. Not all of it, enough. And if she takes it and runs, then she'll be safe. That's all that matters. Mrs. Patterson studied him with shrewd eyes. You're in love with her. It wasn't a question. Caleb didn't confirm or deny it, just met her gaze steadily. I'll deliver your letter, she said finally, though for the record, I think you're either the noblest fool I've ever met or the most foolish noble. Not sure which. 3 days passed with excruciating slowness. Friday came. Caleb worked mechanically, his mind miles away at the Bennett ranch, wondering if Mrs. Patterson had managed to deliver the letter, if Lydia had read it, what she thought. Saturday brought no word. Sunday, he went to church for the first time in months, drawn by the slim hope that Lydia might be there. She wasn't. Bennett wasn't either. Only the girls attended, brought by a neighbor woman who kept them during services. Caleb caught Emma outside after the service. How's your sister doing? He asked. Much better. The doctor says her leg is almost healed. Emma beamed. And Miss Lydia made her a doll from scraps. It's beautiful. That's nice. How is Miss Lydia? Emma's smile dimmed. She seems sad sometimes, but she says it's all right. Papa's been... The girl hesitated. He's been angry a lot. Miss Lydia says it's not about us, but I think it is. I think he's angry we like her. Caleb's chest tightened. I'm sure that's not true. He yells at her when she helps us with lessons, says she's making us soft. But I don't think learning letters makes you soft, do you? No, sweetheart. Learning is never a bad thing. After church, Caleb rode home in a dark mood. The situation at Bennett's was deteriorating. He could feel it, and Lydia was caught in the middle trying to protect the girls while managing a volatile drunk. Monday arrived with unexpected news. Marshal Garrett rode up to Caleb's ranch, his expression grim. Need to talk to you, Turner. Caleb's heart dropped. Is it Lydia? Is she hurt? No, nothing like that. But Bennett filed a complaint against you. Says you've been harassing his fiancée, trespassing on his property, interfering with his household. That's a lie. I figured, but I had to come out and get your side of it officially. Garrett dismounted, accepted the coffee Caleb offered. Tell me what's really going on. Caleb explained. His history with Lydia, finding her at the train depot, his concerns about Bennett's treatment of her and the girls, his attempts to help. Garrett listened without interrupting. When Caleb finished, the marshal sighed. Here's the problem. Legally, Bennett's not wrong to ask you to stay away. It's his property, and if he doesn't want you there, that's his right. And Miss Harper hasn't filed any complaint about his treatment. Because she's afraid, or proud, or both. Probably, but my hands are tied unless she comes to me directly. Garrett paused. Unofficially? I think Bennett's a bastard and that woman deserves better, but the law doesn't care what I think. So what are you saying? I'm saying stay away from Bennett's property unless Miss Harper explicitly invites you. Keep your distance, or he can have you arrested for trespassing. I don't want to do that, but I will if forced. After Garrett left, Caleb paced his cabin like a caged animal. Stay away. Keep his distance. Watch from afar while Lydia suffered in silence. Every instinct screamed against it. But if he pushed harder, he'd lose even the limited ability he had to help. Bennett would make sure of it. And Lydia would be more isolated than ever. Wednesday brought rain again, softer this time, a steady drizzle that grayed the world. Caleb was in the barn when he heard a horse approaching. He stepped outside, hand instinctively going to the rifle he kept by the door. A rider appeared through the mist, small, slight, hunched against the rain. Emma. Caleb ran to meet her. The girl was soaked, shivering, her face streaked with tears and rain. Emma, what happened? Where's your sister? Home with Miss Lydia. I ran away. I took Papa's horse. The words tumbled out between sobs. I had to find you. I didn't know where else to go. It's all right, you're safe. Come inside. We'll get you dry. He brought her into the cabin, wrapped her in blankets, made hot tea. Gradually, her shivering eased and the story emerged in fragmented pieces. Bennett had been drinking heavily for 2 days. Yesterday, he'd gotten violent, not hitting anyone, but throwing furniture, breaking dishes, terrorizing the household. This morning, he'd accused Lydia of plotting to leave him, said he knew about the money Caleb had put aside for her. How did he find out? Caleb asked, though he could guess. Small towns had no secrets. Someone at the bank must have talked. I don't know, but he was so angry. He locked Miss Lydia in her room and said she couldn't come out until she burned the letter from the bank. She tried to explain she hadn't asked for the money, didn't know about it, but he wouldn't listen. Is she still locked in? Emma nodded miserably. He said if she tries to leave, he'll make sure everyone knows she's a whore who was sleeping with you. He said no decent person would help her then. Miss Lydia started crying. I've never seen her cry before. Caleb felt a cold fury settle over him. Where's your father now? Passed out. He drank a whole bottle and fell asleep in his chair. That's when I took the horse. And Sarah? Hiding under the bed. She's scared. Caleb stood, his decision made. Emma, I need you to stay here. There's food in the kitchen, blankets on the bed. I'm going to get Miss Lydia and your sister. We're bringing them back here. What about Papa? Don't worry about your Papa. Can you be brave a little longer? Emma nodded, though her eyes were huge with fear. Caleb saddled his horse, strapped on his gun belt, something he rarely wore but thought he might need today, and rode through the rain toward Bennett's ranch. The ride took an hour. By the time he arrived, his resolve had hardened into something cold and immovable. This ended today, one way or another. The ranch was silent. Bennett's horse stood in the corral, Emma's clearly missing. Caleb dismounted carefully, approaching the house from the side to avoid being seen through the windows. He tried the door. Locked. He moved around to a window, peered inside. Bennett was exactly where Emma had described, slumped in a chair by the cold fireplace, an empty whiskey bottle at his feet, snoring loudly. Caleb circled to the back of the house. There was a window to what must be Lydia's room, smaller, higher, off the ground. He could hear something inside. Crying? No, singing. Very softly someone was singing. He tapped on the window. The singing stopped. A moment later, Lydia's face appeared, pale and shocked. She struggled with the latch. It was nailed shut from the outside. Caleb used his knife to pry the nails loose. The window opened. "Caleb, what are you doing here?" Lydia's voice was hoarse. "If he wakes up—" "He's not waking up. He's dead drunk. And I'm getting you out of here." "I can't. He'll come after me. He'll tell everyone." "I don't care what he tells anyone. You're leaving. Now." "Where's Sarah?" "In the other room." "But Caleb, do you want to stay here?" He cut her off with the blunt question. "Locked in a room, accused and threatened, living in fear? Is that what you want?" "No." The word was barely audible. "But I don't have anywhere else. You have my ranch. You have the money I set aside. You have options, Lydia. You've always had options. You just have to take them." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm so tired of being afraid." "Then stop being afraid. Come with me." For a long moment she just looked at him. Then something shifted in her expression, a decision made, a wall finally coming down. "Help me through the window." It was awkward and undignified, but Caleb pulled her through while she gathered her skirt. She landed in his arms, and for a heartbeat they stood there, her hands on his shoulders, his on her waist, faces inches apart. "Sarah," she whispered, and the moment broke. They crept around to the front door. Caleb picked the lock, a skill learned from a misspent youth, and they slipped inside. Bennett didn't stir. The man was thoroughly unconscious. Sarah sat huddled in the corner of the room she shared with Emma, clutching the doll Lydia had made her. "Come here, sweetheart," Lydia said softly. "We're going on an adventure." "What about Papa?" "Papa will be fine, but we need to go somewhere safe for a while." The girl came willingly, too young to fully understand what was happening, but old enough to recognize the fear in the air. They were almost to the door when Bennett stirred. Everyone froze. He mumbled something, shifted in his chair, his eyes opened to slits, unfocused and bleary. "Lydia?" His voice was slurred. "That you?" Caleb moved in front of her and Sarah instinctively. Bennett's eyes struggled to focus on him. "Turner, the hell you doing in my house?" "Leaving, with Miss Harper and the children." Bennett tried to stand, failed, slumped back. "You can't." "She's mine. Made a deal. The deal's off. She's done." "I'll have you arrested. Trespassing, kidnapping. You do that. Tell the marshal how you locked a woman in her room and threatened her reputation. See how that goes for you." Bennett's face twisted with rage and helplessness. He managed to get to his feet this time, swaying dangerously. "You take her. You're ruining her. Everyone'll know she's a whore." Lydia stepped around Caleb, her voice cold and clear. "Let them know. Let them think whatever they want. I'd rather be a whore with a shred of dignity than a wife to a man who treats me like property. I gave you a home. You gave me a prison." She reached down and took Sarah's hand. "Goodbye, Harold." They walked out. Behind them, Bennett shouted curses and threats, but he was too drunk to follow. Caleb kept himself between the women and the house until they were mounted. Lydia on his horse with Sarah, Caleb walking alongside, and moving away into the rainy afternoon. Only when they'd put a mile between themselves and the Bennett ranch did anyone speak. "Emma?" Sarah asked in a small voice. "She's waiting for us," Lydia assured her. "Somewhere warm and safe." "Are we going to live with Mr. Turner?" Lydia looked at Caleb. He met her eyes steadily. "For now," he said, "until we figure out what comes next." Sarah seemed satisfied with that answer. She leaned against Lydia, who wrapped her arms around the girl protectively. They rode through the rain in silence, leaving behind the nightmare of Bennett's ranch and stepping into an uncertain future that somehow felt less frightening than the certain misery they'd escaped. When they finally reached Caleb's ranch, the rain had softened to a mist that clung to everything like cobwebs. Emma burst from the cabin the moment she heard hoofbeats, running through the mud to meet them. "Sarah, Miss Lydia!" She threw her arms around her sister as soon as Caleb lifted the younger girl down from the horse. "I was so scared Papa would hurt you." "We're fine, sweetheart," Lydia said, though her voice shook with exhaustion. "We're all fine now." Caleb ushered them inside, where the fire he'd built before leaving still burned warm and welcoming. The cabin suddenly felt smaller with 4 people in it, but also more alive than it had been in years. He watched Lydia take in her surroundings. The simple furniture, the clean floors, the sparse but tidy arrangement of a man who lived alone and didn't need much. "It's not fancy," he said, suddenly self-conscious. "It's dry and warm and safe." She met his eyes. "That's more than enough." The girls gravitated toward the fireplace, holding their hands out to the heat. Sarah's doll was damp and bedraggled, and Emma worked carefully to dry it while her sister watched anxiously. "Are you hungry?" Caleb asked. "I've got stew from yesterday. Probably not great, but it's hot." "Anything sounds wonderful." Lydia started to move toward the kitchen area, then swayed slightly. Caleb caught her elbow. "Sit down before you fall down. I can manage to heat stew." For once, she didn't argue. She sank into the chair by the fire, and within moments both girls had climbed into her lap, seeking comfort and warmth. Caleb watched them from the corner of his eye as he worked. Three people who'd been strangers weeks ago, now clinging to each other like family. They ate in near silence, too tired and overwhelmed for conversation. Sarah fell asleep with her head on the table. Emma wasn't far behind, her eyes drooping as she tried to finish her bowl. "They can have the bed," Caleb said. "I'll sleep out in his barn." "You'll do no such thing," Lydia interrupted. "This is your home. We're the intruders." "You're not intruding. You're staying. For tonight, yes. But Caleb, we need to talk about what happens next. We can't just—" "Tomorrow," he cut her off gently. "We'll figure it all out tomorrow. Tonight, everyone just needs to sleep." He carried Sarah to the bed, Emma following drowsily. Lydia tucked them in with practiced efficiency, humming softly until both girls were deeply asleep. When she emerged from the bedroom, her shoulders sagged with the weight of everything that had happened. "Where will you sleep?" she asked quietly. "I've got a bedroll. I'll be comfortable enough by the fire." "And me?" "There's a chair that reclines a bit. I can get you some blankets." "Caleb." She stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Thank you. For everything. For the money, for coming to get us, for not giving up on me even when I pushed you away. You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I was drowning, and I was too proud to admit it, too scared to reach for help. You threw me a rope anyway. Anyone would have done the same." "No, they wouldn't have. Most people would have walked away, would have said I made my bed and had to lie in it." She took a shaky breath. "You're a good man, Caleb Turner, better than I deserve." "Don't say that." He turned to face her fully. "Don't ever say you don't deserve kindness. You deserve everything good in this world, Lydia. You always did." For a long moment they stood there in the firelight, close enough to touch, the air between them charged with 18 years of longing and loss and possibility. Caleb's hand came up slowly, giving her time to step away, and brushed a strand of damp hair from her face. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said softly. "All these years, I told myself you were just a memory, just a girl I'd known for one night. But seeing you again, I realized you were never just anything. You were everything I didn't know I was still looking for." Lydia's breath caught. "Caleb, we can't. It's too complicated." "I know. People will talk. They'll say terrible things about me, about us." "Let them talk. Your reputation means nothing compared to this, compared to you." He cupped her face gently. "I'm not asking for promises or commitments. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to see where this goes, if it goes anywhere at all. And if I'm too broken, too damaged by everything that's happened, then we'll work through it, together." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is. Maybe we've been making it too complicated." He paused. "Do you remember what you asked me? By the creek, 18 years ago? I asked if I could kiss you again, and I said yes. I'm saying yes now too, to whatever you want, whatever you need, whenever you're ready." Lydia opened her eyes, looking at him with an expression that held wonder and fear and hope all tangled together. Then slowly, tentatively, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, questioning, nothing like the passionate embrace of desperate lovers. It was gentler than that, more fragile. The kiss of two people who'd been hurt and were learning to trust again. When they pulled apart, both were trembling. "I'm scared," Lydia whispered. "Me too. What if I make the wrong choice again?" "Then we'll deal with it." "But Lydia, this isn't wrong. Us being here together, safe and warm with those girls sleeping peacefully in the next room? There's nothing wrong about any of it." She nodded slowly, then stepped back. "I should try to sleep. Tomorrow is going to be difficult." "It is, but we'll face it together." He made her a nest of blankets in the reclining chair, banking the fire so it would burn through the night. Lydia settled into it with a sigh of exhaustion, and within minutes her breathing had evened into sleep. Caleb lay in his bedroll watching the fire cast dancing shadows on the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of people breathing, and felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for years. His cabin had never felt like a home before. Not really. It had been shelter, a place to eat and sleep between long days of work. But now, with Lydia curled up by the fire and the girls breathing softly in his bed, it felt like something more, something worth protecting. Morning came gray and cold. Caleb woke first, as always, and built up the fire before stepping outside to check the animals. The rain had stopped, but the world was draped in mist that turned the prairie into something otherworldly and strange. He was hauling water from the well when he heard horses approaching. His hand went instinctively to the rifle propped against the wall. Then he recognized the rider, Marshal Garrett, and he wasn't alone. Doc Pritchard rode beside him, and behind them came Mrs. Patterson from the general store. Caleb's stomach tightened. This wasn't a social call. Garrett dismounted, his expression carefully neutral. "Morning, Turner." "Marshal, Doc, Mrs. Patterson." Caleb nodded to each of them. "Little early for visitors." "Bennett came to see me last night," Garrett said without preamble. "Claims you broke into his house and kidnapped his fiancée and children. Says you're holding them against their will." "Is that what he says?" "That's what he says. I need to talk to Miss Harper. Make sure she's here of her own free will." Caleb considered refusing, then realized that would only make things worse. "She's inside, sleeping. So are the girls." "I'll need to wake her." "I'll do it." Caleb went inside, where Lydia was already stirring, alerted by the voices. The girls were still asleep, curled together like puppies. "It's the marshal," Caleb said quietly. "Bennett filed a complaint. Garrett needs to talk to you." Fear flashed across Lydia's face, but she squared her shoulders. "All right. Let me make myself presentable." She smoothed her dress, tried to tame her hair, then stepped outside with the bearing of someone walking to judgment. Garrett tipped his hat. "Miss Harper, sorry to disturb you so early." "Marshal." Her voice was steady. "I assume Mr. Bennett sent you." "He did. Made some serious allegations. I need to know, are you here of your own free will?" "Yes." "Did Mr. Turner force you to come here?" "No, he rescued me." She met Garrett's eyes without flinching. "Harold Bennett locked me in a room. Threatened my reputation if I tried to leave. Mr. Turner helped me and the children escape." "That's the truth." Pritchard spoke up. "I can confirm Miss Harper was in distress when I saw her last week. Exhausted, frightened, not eating properly. I told Turner she needed help." Mrs. Patterson added, "And I delivered a letter to her, a letter about an account Mr. Turner set up so she'd have money to leave if she needed it. That's hardly the action of a kidnapper." Garrett looked between them all, then sighed. "Bennett wants me to arrest Turner, wants me to bring you and the girls back." "I'm not going back," Lydia said firmly. "I'd rather sleep under a tree than spend another night in that house." "What about your engagement?" "There was no engagement. There was a business arrangement that he violated repeatedly. He drank, he threatened, he terrorized his own children. I owe him nothing." "He'll make trouble for you," Garrett warned. "He's already telling anyone who'll listen that you're Turner's mistress, that you've been carrying on with him since you arrived." Lydia's face paled, but her voice didn't waver. "Let him say what he wants. I know the truth. So do these witnesses. That will have to be enough." Garrett studied her for a long moment. "You understand what you're choosing? The scandal, the gossip?" "I understand I'm choosing dignity over degradation, freedom over fear. Yes, Marshal, I understand exactly what I'm choosing." "All right then." Garrett turned to Caleb. You taking responsibility for her and the children? Yes. You know what people are going to say. I don't care what people say. You will when they stop doing business with you, when they cross the street to avoid you. Small town like this, reputation matters. Some things matter more. Garrett shook his head, but there was something like respect in his expression. Bennett's going to keep pushing. He might try to take the girls back, claim parental rights. Can he do that? Lydia asked, fear creeping into her voice. He's their father, Garrett said. Legally, he has more claim to them than you do, unless he's proven unfit, which is hard to do. He locked a woman in a room, Caleb said. He drinks himself unconscious while his children go hungry. How is that not unfit? It's my word against his, Lydia said quietly. And I'm just a woman he never actually married. I have no standing. You have witnesses, Mrs. Patterson insisted. You have people who've seen how he behaves. That has to count for something. It might, or it might not. Garrett's tone was grim. The law favors fathers, especially over unmarried women with questionable reputations. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's reality. A cold knot of dread formed in Caleb's stomach. They'd escaped Bennett's house, but they hadn't escaped his reach. Not yet. What do we do? Lydia asked. Garrett was quiet for a moment. Then, the girls are his children, but you could petition for guardianship, claim he's unfit. It would require a hearing, witnesses, proof, and it would take time. How much time? Weeks, maybe months. And in the meantime? In the meantime, keep them safe. Keep them hidden if you have to, and hope Bennett gets drunk enough to do something that lands him in my jail for good. After the visitors left, Caleb and Lydia stood in the yard watching them disappear into the mist. This isn't over, Lydia said softly. No, but we knew it wouldn't be. He's going to come for them. For the girls. Let him try. Caleb's voice was hard. I'll be ready. Inside, the girls were awake, their small faces anxious. Emma had clearly heard at least part of the conversation. Are we going back to Papa? She asked. Lydia knelt down to her level. Not if I can help it, sweetheart. But the marshal said a lot of things, but here's what matters. Mr. Turner and I are going to do everything we can to keep you safe, both of you. Do you trust me? Emma nodded slowly. Sarah clutched her doll tighter. Then trust that we'll figure this out, all right? All right, Miss Lydia. The next few days were tense. Caleb kept watch constantly, half expecting Bennett to ride up with the marshal in a court order. But no one came. The prairie remained quiet, the mist gradually lifting to reveal autumn sunshine. Lydia threw herself into making the cabin livable for 4 people instead of 1. She organized, cleaned, rearranged. Caleb watched her move through his space, leaving traces of herself everywhere. A vase of wildflowers on the table, curtains on the windows, the smell of bread baking instead of burned stew. The girls blossomed in the safety and stability. Emma helped with chores and played teacher to her sister, writing letters in the dirt outside. Sarah's leg healed steadily, and she started walking without the crutch, though she still favored it slightly. In the evenings, they ate together around the table. Simple meals that somehow tasted better than anything Caleb had eaten alone. After dinner, Lydia would read to the girls from a book Mrs. Patterson had dropped off, or they'd play simple games or just sit by the fire talking. It felt like family, like home. But underneath the domestic peace, tension simmered. Caleb saw it in the way Lydia startled at sudden noises, the way she glanced toward the road whenever they were outside, the way she held the girls a little tighter, as if afraid they might be snatched away. A week after their escape, Caleb rode to town for supplies. He went early, hoping to avoid the worst of the gossip, but of course the gossip found him anyway. In the general store, conversations died when he walked in. People stared, whispered behind their hands. Mrs. Patterson served him with her usual brisk efficiency, but even she looked uncomfortable. It's bad, isn't it? Caleb asked quietly as she tallied his purchases. People talk. You knew they would. What are they saying? That you stole another man's bride, that Miss Harper's your mistress, and those girls are just an excuse, that you're both immoral and shameless. She paused. But some people are saying Bennett had it coming, that someone needed to stand up to him. You've got more support than you think, Mr. Turner. It's just quieter than the gossip. Is Bennett still making trouble? He was in here 3 days ago, drunk and ranting. Told everyone you'd pay for what you did. Marshall had to escort him out. She lowered her voice. Be careful. He's not just angry anymore. He's vengeful. Caleb was loading supplies into his wagon when a man approached. Someone he didn't recognize, tall and thin with the look of a traveling preacher. You Turner? The man asked. I am. Got a message for you from Harold Bennett. The man pulled out an envelope. He wanted me to deliver this personal-like. Caleb took it warily. Inside was a single sheet of paper with crude handwriting. You think you won. You didn't. Those girls are mine by law and blood. The woman too, since she agreed to marry me. I'm filing papers with the county judge. You'll lose everything. And when I get them back, you're going to wish you'd minded your own business. Caleb crumpled the letter in his fist. You can tell Bennett if he wants to discuss this. He can come see me in person, not hide behind messengers. I ain't hiding behind nobody, a voice called out. Caleb turned. Bennett stood at the edge of the street, swaying slightly even this early in the day. But his eyes were clear enough, burning with hatred. You destroyed my life, Bennett said, his voice carrying across the street. People were stopping to watch now, gathering like crows to a spectacle. Took my woman, stole my children, ruined my name. You did all that yourself, Caleb said evenly. I just gave them a way out. You had no right. I had every right. So did Lydia. She's not your property, and neither are those girls. They're my daughters. Then you should have acted like a father instead of a drunk. Bennett's face purpled with rage. His hand went to his belt, and Caleb saw the flash of a gun handle. Around them, people gasped and scattered. Caleb's own hand moved to his hip, but he didn't draw. Just stood there, steady and calm, watching Bennett struggle with the decision. Go ahead, Caleb said quietly. Draw on me. Right here in the middle of town with the marshal's office 50 feet away. See how that works out for you. Bennett's hand trembled on the gun. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then Garrett's voice cut through the tension. Bennett, take your hand off that weapon right now. The marshal strode into the street, his own gun drawn. Bennett looked between them, then slowly removed his hand from the gun. This ain't over, he said to Caleb. No, I don't expect it is. Garrett took Bennett by the arm, firmly, but not roughly. Come on, let's go sleep this off. As the marshal led Bennett away, Caleb became aware of the crowd watching him. Some faces showed disgust. Others showed approval. Most just showed curiosity, hungry for whatever scandal would unfold next. He finished loading his wagon in silence and rode home, the confrontation replaying in his mind. Bennett had been ready to draw on him, ready to kill him in broad daylight in front of witnesses. That's how far the man had fallen into rage and desperation. And if he was willing to kill Caleb in town, what would he do if he caught them alone? When he arrived home, Lydia met him at the door. She took one look at his face and said, What happened? He told her everything, the letter, the confrontation, Bennett's hand on his gun. With each word, he watched her face grow paler. He's going to kill you, she whispered. He's going to try. Caleb, this is too dangerous. Maybe I should... Don't. He caught her hands. Don't say you should go back. Don't even think it. But if he hurts you... He won't. I can handle Bennett. Can you? He's drunk and desperate, and he has nothing left to lose. That makes him dangerous. I know. But I'm not afraid of him, Lydia. I'm not going to let fear dictate my choices. Not anymore. And neither should you. She pulled her hands free, pacing the small cabin. I've brought nothing but trouble to your life. You were peaceful and safe before I arrived. I was alone before you arrived. There's a difference. Caleb, no. Listen to me. He turned her to face him. I spent 18 years half alive, going through motions, convincing myself I was content when I was just numb. You woke me up, Lydia. You reminded me what it feels like to care about something more than the next day's work. I'm not giving that up. I'm not giving you up. Not for Bennett, not for gossip, not for anything. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You barely know me anymore. We're not the same people we were 18 years ago. Then let's get to know each other now, as we are. Not as we were or might have been, but as we are. He wiped her tears with his thumb. Unless you don't want that. Unless I'm pushing you toward something you're not ready for. I don't know what I'm ready for, she admitted. Everything is happening so fast. A month ago, I was in St. Louis with no prospects. Then I was at Bennett's ranch thinking I'd made the worst mistake of my life. Now I'm here with you, and I don't know if this is real or if I'm going to wake up and find it was all a desperate dream. It's real. He pulled her closer. I'm real. This is real. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together, all right? She nodded against his chest, and he held her while she cried, for fear, for relief, for everything she'd been through and everything still to come. That night, they talked late into the evening after the girls had gone to sleep. Really talked, filling in the gaps of 18 years. Lydia told him about her parents' deaths, the loneliness of St. Louis, the desperation that had driven her to answer Bennett's advertisement. Caleb told her about moving west, building the ranch, the women he'd courted half-heartedly and let go without much regret. Did you ever marry? Lydia asked. No, came close once, but it didn't feel right. She deserved someone who loved her completely, and I couldn't give her that. Why not? He looked at her in the firelight. Because part of me was still 16 years old, sitting by a creek with a girl who kissed me and made me believe in magic. That's ridiculous. You can't hold on to a memory for 18 years. Can't I? You're here, aren't you? That memory brought you back to me. Coincidence brought me back, bad luck and desperation. Maybe. Or maybe we were always meant to find our way back to each other. He paused. Do you believe in fate? I don't know what I believe anymore. I used to think I had everything figured out. Now I just try to get through each day without falling apart. You're stronger than you think. I'm terrified all the time. Strength isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. He reached across the space between them and took her hand. You walked away from Bennett. You chose uncertainty over certain misery. That took strength. Or foolishness. Sometimes they're the same thing. She laughed. A small sound, but genuine. It was the first time he'd heard her really laugh since the train depot, and the sound went through him like warmth. I don't deserve you, she said softly. Stop saying that. You deserve everything good this world has to offer. Then why does it feel like I'm taking advantage, like I'm using you for protection and safety, and what if you are? He cut her off. What if you're using me for exactly those things? I'm offering them freely, no strings attached. You don't owe me anything, Lydia. Not gratitude, not affection, not... She kissed him, sudden and fierce, cutting off his words. It was different from the gentle kiss of the night before. This was desperate, hungry, almost violent in its intensity. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. I'm not using you, she said fiercely. I care about you. I don't know how much or in what way or where it's going, but I care. You're not just safety. She struggled for words. You're the only good thing that's happened to me in so long, I can't remember the last time I felt this way. What way? Hopeful. The word came out broken. Like maybe the future doesn't have to be just survival. Like maybe there's something worth looking forward to. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough that he could feel her heartbeat against his chest. Then hold on to that hope. Don't let Bennett or anyone else take it away. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms while the fire burned down to embers. Outside, the prairie night settled in with its sounds of wind and distance. Inside, two people who'd lost each other 18 years ago held tight to the second chance they'd been given. The next morning brought visitors, Mackenzie and 3 other neighboring ranchers. They sat their horses in Caleb's yard, their expressions serious. Heard about the trouble in town, Mackenzie said without preamble. Bennett's telling everyone you kidnapped his family, swearing he's going to kill you and take them back. Let him try. He might do more than try. Word is, he's been buying ammunition, cleaning his guns. Man like that, drunk and desperate, he's liable to do anything. Caleb crossed his arms. I'm not running him off my own land. Didn't say you should. We came to offer help. Mackenzie gestured to the other men. We've all dealt with Bennett over the years. Know what kind of man he is. If he comes here looking for trouble, you won't be alone. I appreciate that, but I can handle... This isn't about what you can handle, one of the other ranchers cut in. It's about what's right. That woman and those girls deserve protection, and Bennett deserves to be stopped before he hurts someone. We'll take turns riding patrol, Mackenzie said. Make sure someone's always nearby in case he tries something. Won't interfere with your life, won't make you beholden. Just neighbors watching out for neighbors. Caleb felt his throat tighten. Thank you, all of you. Don't thank us yet. This might get ugly before it's over. They weren't wrong. Over the next week, tension built like a storm gathering strength. Bennett was seen riding near Caleb's property line, always just outside trespassing distance, watching. Caleb kept the rifle close and the girls inside as much as possible. Lydia grew quieter, more withdrawn. She threw herself into work, cooking, cleaning, mending clothes that didn't need mending. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. Talk to me, Caleb said one evening after the girls were asleep. About what? About what you're thinking, what you're feeling. She set down the shirt she'd been mending. I'm thinking I've ruined your life. I'm feeling guilty and scared and angry all at once. Angry at who? Everyone. Bennett for being what he is, the law for favoring fathers over everyone else, myself for getting into this situation, you for making me care when I'd convinced myself I was better off not caring about anything. Is that what you'd convinced yourself? It was easier that way. Safer. If you don't hope for anything, you can't be disappointed. That's not living, that's just existing. Sometimes existing is all you can manage. He moved closer, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. You're managing more than that now. You're fighting. You're protecting those girls. You're building something new here. Am I? Or am I just hiding from one bad situation in another situation that's equally impossible? What makes this impossible? Us. This. She gestured between them. Whatever this is or might become. We're living together unwed with 2 children who aren't ours. The scandal alone. I don't care about scandal. You should. Your reputation means nothing without you. The words came out fierce, almost angry. Don't you understand that yet? I spent 18 years building this ranch, making a name for myself, being respectable and responsible and everything a good man is supposed to be. And I was miserable, alone, half dead inside. You make me feel alive again, Lydia. If that costs me reputation, so be it. Caleb, marry me. The words hung in the air between them, shocking them both. Caleb hadn't planned to say it, hadn't even fully formed the thought before it was tumbling out of his mouth. But now that it was spoken, he didn't want to take it back. Lydia stared at him. What? Marry me. Make this official. Make it legal. Give me the right to protect you and those girls without question. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything. We've known each other 3 weeks. Well, 3 weeks now, and one night 18 years ago. That's not enough time to How much time is enough? I knew I wanted you the moment I saw you step off that train. Everything since then has just confirmed it. That's not love. That's memory and nostalgia, and it's love. He said it simply, certainly. Maybe it started as memory, but it's grown into something real. I love you, Lydia Harper. I love your strength and your stubbornness. I love how you protect those girls like a lioness. I love the way you hum when you cook and the way you fall asleep reading by the fire. I love who I am when I'm with you. So yes, I'm asking you to marry me. Tears streamed down her face. This is insane. Probably. We barely know each other as adults. Then we'll learn. We have time. What if it doesn't work? What if we marry and realize we made a mistake? Then we'll work through it, together. He took her hands. I'm not promising perfection, Lydia. I'm promising partnership. Someone who'll stand beside you no matter what comes. Someone who'll choose you every day for the rest of my life. If you'll have me. She pulled her hands away, standing and moving to the window. Outside, stars filled the prairie sky. For a long time she said nothing, and Caleb's heart sank. He'd pushed too hard, too fast, asked for more than she could give. Then she spoke, her voice so quiet he almost missed it. By the creek, that night. Do you remember what we talked about? You told me about wanting to see the West. I told you about wanting my own land. And I said maybe someday we'd both get what we wanted. She turned to face him. I didn't think it would take 18 years and cause so much pain to get here. Is that a yes? It's a yes, but she moved back toward him. Yes, I want to marry you, but not because I need protection or security. Not because it's practical or solves our problems with Bennett and the gossip. Then why? Because when I'm with you, I remember who I used to be. Before loss and disappointment taught me to expect nothing. You make me believe I can be that person again, someone who hopes, someone who loves. She took his hands. So yes, Caleb Turner, I'll marry you. But you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you won't regret it. Promise me that 10 years from now, when the romance has faded and we're just two people sharing a life, you won't look at me and wish you'd chosen differently. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I promise. 10 years, 20, 50. I'll never regret choosing you. She kissed him then, soft and slow and full of promise. Outside, the prairie night whispered secrets to the wind. Inside, two people who'd found each other across time and distance and impossible circumstances held tight to the future they'd chosen together. They told the girls the next morning over breakfast. Emma's eyes went wide with delight, while Sarah clapped her hands and asked if she could help with the wedding. Their joy was so pure, so uncomplicated, that Lydia felt her lingering doubts begin to dissolve like morning mist. Does this mean we get to stay here forever? Emma asked, her voice hopeful but cautious, as if afraid the answer might shatter everything. It means we're going to try, Lydia said carefully, but there are still some things we need to work out. Like what? Caleb exchanged a glance with Lydia before answering. Like talking to the judge about making sure you girls are taken care of properly, making sure everyone understands this is your home now. Emma's smile faded slightly. She was old enough to understand what he wasn't saying, that their father might still have claims, might still cause trouble. Sarah, mercifully, was too young to grasp the complexity and just continued planning what flowers they should pick for the ceremony. Later that day, Caleb rode to town to arrange things with the county clerk. Lydia watched him go with a mixture of hope and dread twisting in her stomach. She kept the girls close, teaching them letters and numbers at the kitchen table, but her mind wandered constantly to what might be happening in town. He returned as the sun was setting, his expression grim. What happened? Lydia asked as soon as the girls were out of earshot. The clerk says we can get married, no problem, but… He hesitated. Bennett's already filed a petition with the judge. Claims you're mentally unfit to make decisions, that I coerced you, and that the girls are being kept from him unlawfully. Lydia's hands went cold. Can he do that? He can file whatever he wants. Doesn't mean the judge will agree. But there's going to be a hearing 2 weeks from now. We'll both have to testify, and so will Bennett. What will they ask me? Everything. Why you came here, why you left Bennett, what your relationship with me is, whether you're fit to care for the girls. He took her hands. They're going to try to make you look bad, Lydia. Make it seem like you're unstable or immoral or both. Maybe I am. Maybe they're right to question. Stop. His grip tightened. You're none of those things. You're a woman who made hard choices in impossible circumstances. That's all. And we're going to stand in front of that judge and tell the truth. Let them judge the truth however they want. And if they rule against us, then we'll figure out what comes next. But we're not giving up before the fight even starts. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo. They went ahead with quiet wedding plans. Lydia altered one of her dresses, the girls picked wildflowers and pressed them between the pages of books. Caleb cleaned up the cabin and built an additional room onto the back for the girls. They moved through the motions of building a life together while knowing it could all be torn away. Marshal Garrett stopped by one afternoon with news that made Caleb's jaw tighten. Bennett had been arrested the night before for public intoxication and disturbing the peace, but he'd been released the same morning. Judge gave him a warning, Garrett said, shaking his head. Said he'd take Bennett's behavior into consideration at the custody hearing, but it wasn't enough to hold him. So he's free to keep making threats? Unless he acts on them, my hands are tied. The marshal's expression was apologetic. I'm sorry, Turner. I know this isn't what you want to hear. After Garrett left, Lydia found Caleb in the new room he'd built, hammering with more force than necessary. He's going to win, isn't he? She said quietly. Caleb set down the hammer. Not if I have anything to say about it. You're not a lawyer. You're not a judge. You can't control what they decide. No, but I can make damn sure they know the truth. He turned to face her. Those girls are terrified of going back to him. Sarah still wakes up crying some nights. Emma flinches when she hears a man raise his voice. That means something. That has to mean something. It should, but we both know the law doesn't always care about what should matter. He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself lean into his strength. They stood like that for a long moment, drawing comfort from each other's presence. Whatever happens, Caleb said, we face it together. You're not alone anymore, Lydia. Remember that. The night before the hearing, neither of them could sleep. They sat on the porch long after the girls had gone to bed, watching the stars wheel overhead. I keep thinking about Tennessee, Lydia said suddenly. That night by the creek. How simple everything seemed, how full of possibility. We were young. Everything seems simple when you're young. Do you ever wish we'd made different choices? That we'd tried harder to find each other after my family left? Every day for the first 5 years. Then I convinced myself it was for the best. That we would have been too young to make it work anyway. He looked at her. Now I think we lost a lot of time. But maybe we needed that time. Maybe we had to become who we are now to appreciate what we have. That's very philosophical for a rancher. I have my moments, he smiled, but it faded quickly. Are you scared about tomorrow? Terrified, not just of losing the girls, though that would break my heart, but of what it means if Bennett wins. That money and law and masculine authority matter more than love or protection or what's actually right. Then we'll make sure they see what's right. We'll tell them about the locked room, the drinking, the neglect. We'll show them that those girls deserve better. And if they don't care, then we'll find another way. I won't let him take you or those girls. I don't care what any judge says. The determination in his voice both comforted and frightened her. Caleb, you can't. Can't what? Protect the people I love? Watch while some drunk terrorizes children? I know you want to believe in the system, in the law, but sometimes the law is wrong. And when it's wrong, good people have to stand up and do what's right anyway. That kind of thinking gets people hurt, gets them arrested or worse. So does doing nothing. They sat in tense silence until Lydia finally spoke again, her voice soft. Promise me something. Promise me that no matter what happens tomorrow, you won't do anything that puts you in danger. I couldn't bear it if you got hurt because of me. I can't promise that. Caleb, I can't promise I'll stand by and let harm come to you or those girls just to keep myself safe. That's not who I am. He took her hand. But I promise I'll be smart about it. I won't go looking for a fight. Fair enough? It wasn't, really, but Lydia nodded anyway because she knew it was the best she'd get from him. The morning of the hearing dawned cold and gray. They dressed carefully. Caleb in his only good suit, Lydia in the altered dress that was now her wedding dress, though they'd decided to postpone the actual ceremony until after the hearing. The girls wore their best clothes too, their faces solemn and scared despite Lydia's attempts to reassure them. Mrs. Patterson arrived with her husband to watch the girls during the hearing. Emma clung to Lydia, not wanting to let go. What if you don't come back? The girl whispered. I'll come back. I promise. But what if the judge says, no matter what the judge says, I'll come back to you, even if it's just to say goodbye? Lydia's voice broke on the last word. She pulled herself together. But it won't come to that. Mr. Turner and I are going to explain everything, and the judge will understand. She hoped she sounded more confident than she felt. The courthouse was a simple brick building in the center of Dodge City, imposing in its plainness. A crowd had already gathered, townsfolk drawn by gossip and scandal, witnesses on both sides, and reporters from the local newspaper eager for a story. Caleb kept his hand at the small of Lydia's back as they walked through the crowd, ignoring the whispers and pointed stares. Bennett was already inside, sitting with a lawyer Lydia didn't recognize. He looked cleaner than she'd ever seen him, sober and almost respectable in a suit that didn't quite fit. Their eyes met across the room, and the hatred in his gaze made her stomach turn. Don't look at him, Caleb murmured. He doesn't matter. Only the truth matters. Judge Harrison was a stern-faced man in his 60s who surveyed the packed courtroom with obvious displeasure. He called the proceedings to order with a sharp crack of his gavel. This is a hearing to determine custody of Sarah and Emma Bennett, and to assess the allegations made by Mr. Harold Bennett against Miss Lydia Harper and Mr. Caleb Turner. Mr. Bennett, your lawyer may proceed. Bennett's lawyer stood, a slick man named Whitmore with oil-smooth hair and a practiced smile. He painted a picture of Bennett as a grieving widower trying to rebuild his life, who'd hired Lydia in good faith only to have her seduce his neighbor and steal his children. Miss Harper arrived under false pretenses, Whitmore claimed. She agreed to marry Mr. Bennett, accepted his hospitality, then began carrying on with Mr. Turner almost immediately. When Mr. Bennett discovered the affair, she fled with his daughters, aided by Mr. Turner, who had been lurking around the property for weeks. Lydia's hands clenched in her lap. Every word was a distortion, a lie built on fragments of truth. When it was their turn, Caleb's lawyer, a young but sharp man named Douglas, whom Mackenzie had recommended, stood and methodically dismantled the narrative. He called Doc Pritchard first. In your professional opinion, Doctor, what was Miss Harper's condition when you examined her at the Bennett Ranch? She was severely exhausted, malnourished, and showing signs of extreme stress, Pritchard said clearly. I've seen similar symptoms in women trapped in abusive situations. Did you observe any evidence of abuse? Not physical abuse in the traditional sense, but neglect is a form of abuse, and those children and Miss Harper were clearly being neglected. The house was in disrepair, there was insufficient food, and Mr. Bennett was intoxicated during my visit. Whitmore cross-examined aggressively. But you never actually witnessed Mr. Bennett harming anyone, did you? I witnessed him creating an environment of fear and deprivation. That's harm enough. Next came Mrs. Patterson, who testified about delivering supplies to the Bennett Ranch and finding the household in chaos. The girls frightened, Lydia working herself to exhaustion, trying to maintain order. Did Miss Harper ever speak to you about leaving? Douglas asked. She asked me about options, about whether there were any positions in town, any families who might need help. She was looking for a way out, but she was too proud to ask for charity and too scared to leave those girls behind. Marshal Garrett testified about the multiple times he'd arrested Bennett for public drunkenness, about the threats Bennett had made against Caleb and Lydia. Then it was Lydia's turn to testify. She walked to the witness stand on shaking legs, feeling the weight of every eye in the courtroom. Douglas asked her to tell her story in her own words, and she did. The desperation that had led her to answer Bennett's advertisement, the reality she'd found when she arrived, the fear that had grown with each passing day. Did Mr. Turner force you to leave the Bennett Ranch? Douglas asked. No, he offered me a choice, a real choice, for the first time since I'd arrived in Kansas. And what was that choice? Safety or survival, dignity or desperation. He offered me a home, protection, and the freedom to decide my own future. No one had offered me those things in a very long time. Whitmore's cross-examination was brutal. He implied she was a woman of loose morals who'd been involved with Caleb from the beginning. He suggested she'd manipulated Bennett to get what she wanted, then discarded him when a better option appeared. Isn't it true, Miss Harper, that you were sharing Mr. Turner's bed within days of arriving at his ranch? No, that's not true. But you're living under his roof, unmarried, with 2 young girls. What message does that send? It sends the message that sometimes survival matters more than reputation, that protecting children matters more than gossip. So you admit your behavior has been improper? I admit my behavior has been necessary. There's a difference. When Caleb took the stand, he was calm and direct. He explained his history with Lydia, his concerns about Bennett's treatment of her and the girls, his decision to help them escape. I'm not claiming to be a saint, Caleb said when Whitmore pressed him. I'm just a man who saw people in danger and chose to act. If that makes me guilty of something, so be it, but I'd make the same choice again. Finally, Bennett himself testified. He played the role of wronged father well, speaking of his love for his daughters, his plans to provide for them, his heartbreak at having them stolen away. But Douglas's cross-examination exposed the cracks in his facade. Mr. Bennett, how many times have you been arrested for public intoxication in the past year? A few times. I had some hard days after my wife died. 4 times, according to Marshal Garrett's records. And how many times were you too drunk to care for your daughters during that same period? I always took care of my girls. Did you? Because we have testimony that they were often left alone while you drank in town, that they went to bed hungry, that the older girl, Emma, was essentially raising her younger sister while you were incapacitated. Bennett's face reddened. That's a lie. Is it? Is it also a lie that you locked Miss Harper in her room when she tried to access money that would have allowed her to leave? She was trying to steal my children. They're not property to be stolen, Mr. Bennett. They're human beings who deserve safety and stability. Have you provided that? Bennett couldn't answer, his anger choking off his words. The judge called for a brief recess. Caleb and Lydia stepped outside, both drained from the ordeal. The crowd had grown larger, people gathering to hear the verdict. How do you think it went? Lydia asked. I think we told the truth. That's all we could do. They were called back inside after 20 minutes. Judge Harrison looked over his notes, his expression unreadable. I've heard testimony from both sides, he began, and I've reviewed the evidence presented. This is not a simple case. The law gives fathers considerable rights over their children, but those rights are not absolute. They must be balanced against the welfare of the children themselves. Lydia's heart hammered against her ribs. Mr. Bennett, I'm troubled by the evidence of your drinking and the conditions described at your ranch. While I understand you've suffered loss, that doesn't excuse neglect of your children or mistreatment of those in your care. Bennett started to speak, but the judge silenced him with a look. However, I'm also troubled by the irregular nature of this situation. Miss Harper and Mr. Turner are living together without marriage, which sets a questionable example. And the circumstances of the children's removal from Mr. Bennett's custody, while perhaps justified, were not handled through proper legal channels. Here it comes, Lydia thought. He's going to send the girls back. Therefore, I'm making the following ruling. Temporary custody of Sarah and Emma Bennett is granted to Miss Lydia Harper on the condition that she marry Mr. Caleb Turner within 1 week, thus providing a stable two-parent household. Mr. Bennett will have supervised visitation rights once per month, with Marshal Garrett present to ensure the safety of all parties. This arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months to determine if it should become permanent. The courtroom erupted in noise. Lydia sat frozen, trying to process what she'd heard. They'd won. Not completely, not permanently, but they'd won. Furthermore, the judge continued, raising his voice over the crowd, Mr. Bennett, you will cease all harassment of Miss Harper and Mr. Turner. Any further threats or attempts at intimidation will result in the complete termination of your parental rights. Do you understand? Bennett's face was purple with rage, but he managed a stiff nod. This hearing is adjourned. Lydia found herself in Caleb's arms, both of them too overwhelmed to speak. Around them, people offered congratulations or muttered disapproval depending on their sympathies. But none of it mattered. They had the girls. They had a chance. Outside, Bennett caught up with them on the courthouse steps. Marshal Garrett stepped between them immediately, but Bennett made no move toward violence. This isn't over, he said, his voice low and venomous. 6 months, they said. 6 months to prove you're better than me. You'll fail, you'll mess up somehow, and when you do, I'll be waiting to take my daughters back. They're not possessions, Lydia said quietly. They're children who deserve love and stability. If you truly cared about them, you'd want what's best for them, not just what satisfies your pride. You don't know anything about what I want. I know you drink more than you love. I know you'd rather be right than be a father. That's all I need to know. Bennett looked like he wanted to hit her. Garrett's hand went to his gun, a clear warning. Finally, Bennett spun on his heel and stalked away, pushing through the crowd. That man's going to be trouble, Garrett said. Watch yourselves. They promised they would, then hurried to Mrs. Patterson's house where the girls waited. Emma and Sarah ran to them, and Lydia gathered them close, breathing in the scent of their hair, feeling their solid warmth. We can stay? Emma asked, her voice muffled against Lydia's shoulder. You can stay. We all can. That night, after the girls had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from excitement and emotion, Caleb and Lydia sat together on the porch swing he'd built the week before. 1 week, Lydia said. That's not much time to plan a wedding. We don't need much time. We just need each other and a few witnesses. He paused. Unless you want something bigger, something proper? I want something real. That's all. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I can't believe we won. I was so sure. I know, me too. 6 months. That's what we have to prove ourselves. To prove we can be a family. Then that's what we'll do. He kissed the top of her head. We'll build something so strong, so stable, that no judge could question it. We'll give those girls a home worth keeping. What if it's not enough? It will be, because we won't accept anything less. They sat in the darkness, wrapped in each other, and in the fragile hope of new beginnings. Above them, stars filled the prairie sky like promises waiting to be kept. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the moon. The wind carried the scent of autumn earth and coming rain. Inside the cabin, two girls slept peacefully for the first time in longer than either could remember. And on the porch, two people who'd found each other across time and distance and impossible odds held tight to the future they'd fought so hard to claim. 5 days later, they married. It was a small ceremony held behind the barn with Mackenzie and Mrs. Patterson as witnesses and Marshall Garrett in attendance to make it official. The girls wore wildflowers in their hair and stood beside Lydia, beaming with pride. Caleb wore his suit from the courthouse, and Lydia wore her altered dress, simple but beautiful in the afternoon sunlight. There was no preacher. The local minister had refused to perform the ceremony, citing moral objections to the situation. So Marshall Garrett, who'd been deputized for such purposes, spoke the words that bound them together. "Do you, Caleb Turner, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was steady, his eyes never leaving Lydia's face. "And do you, Lydia Harper, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." Her voice shook slightly, but not with doubt, with emotion too large for words. "Then, by the power vested in me by the state of Kansas, I pronounce you husband and wife." Caleb kissed her softly, sweetly, while the small group applauded. The girls cheered, and somewhere overhead a hawk cried out as if in celebration. Mrs. Patterson had brought food, a proper wedding feast of roasted chicken, fresh bread, and a cake she'd baked herself. They ate at a table set up in the yard, laughing and telling stories as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Emma asked if she could call Lydia Mama now, and Lydia had to excuse herself for a moment, overcome with tears she didn't want the girls to see. Caleb found her behind the barn, steadied her with his presence. "Happy tears?" he asked. "The happiest. I never imagined I could have this. A family, a home, a man who looks at me like I'm worth something." "You're worth everything." When they returned to the celebration, Sarah had convinced Mackenzie to play as fiddle, and the old rancher was working through a clumsy but enthusiastic version of a traditional wedding waltz. Caleb swept Lydia into his arms, and they danced in the grass, spinning and laughing like the young people they'd once been. The girls joined in, creating a chaotic, joyful mess of movement and music. Mrs. Patterson dabbed at her eyes with her handkerchief. Marshall Garrett smiled, a rare expression on his usually stern face. As the sun set and the celebration wound down, their guests departed with hugs and congratulations. Caleb and Lydia stood in the yard watching them go, the girls already half asleep on their feet. "Come on, you two," Lydia said gently. "Time for bed." She tucked them in together, something they preferred now, finding comfort in each other's presence. As she smoothed Sarah's hair back from her forehead, the girl looked up at her with sleepy eyes. "Are you really our mama now?" she asked. "If you want me to be." "I want you to be. I don't remember our first mama very well, just that she was sick and then she was gone. But you're here. You stayed." "I'll always stay," Lydia promised, her throat tight. "You're stuck with me now." Sarah smiled and closed her eyes. Emma was already asleep, one hand reaching out to hold her sister's. Lydia returned to the main room where Caleb waited. The cabin was quiet now, peaceful, filled with the gentle sounds of home. He held out his hand to her. "Dance with me again?" he asked. Without an audience this time. There was no music, but they swayed together anyway, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. Through the window, moonlight painted the prairie silver. Inside, the fire cast warm shadows on the walls. "Are you happy?" Caleb asked softly. Lydia thought about the question, thought about everything she'd been through, the loss, the loneliness, the desperate gamble that had brought her to Bennett's ranch, thought about the fear and uncertainty that had plagued her for so long. Then she thought about this moment, this man, these girls sleeping peacefully in the next room, This home they were building together from broken pieces and hard-won hope. "Yes," she said. "Against all odds, in spite of everything, yes, I'm happy." He pulled her closer, and they danced in the firelight, two people who'd lost each other and found their way back, who'd survived everything life had thrown at them and emerged stronger for it. Outside, the prairie night settled in with all its wild beauty. Inside, a new family began the first night of their life together, built on love and courage and the unshakable belief that sometimes, against all odds, broken things could be made whole again. The first month of marriage passed in a blur of adjustment and discovery. Caleb and Lydia learned each other's rhythms, when to speak and when to offer silent companionship, how to navigate the small frictions that arose from two independent people suddenly sharing every aspect of life. The girls flourished in the stability, their laughter filling the cabin more often than tears. But Bennett's shadow hung over everything. True to the judge's order, he arrived for his first supervised visit on a cold October morning. Marshal Garrett accompanied him, his presence a silent reminder of the boundaries that had been set. The girls clung to Lydia when they saw their father dismount from his wagon. "It's all right," she murmured, though her own stomach churned with anxiety. "The marshal is here. You're safe." Bennett had cleaned himself up for the occasion. His face was shaven, his clothes pressed, and he appeared sober. But his eyes, when they landed on Lydia, were cold with barely suppressed rage. "Girls," he said, forcing warmth into his voice, "come give your papa a hug." Emma and Sarah moved forward reluctantly. The embrace was stiff, uncomfortable, nothing like the easy affection they showed Lydia and Caleb. Bennett noticed, and his jaw tightened. The visit lasted 2 hours. Bennett tried to engage the girls in conversation, asking about their lessons, their daily activities. But his questions felt more like interrogation than genuine interest, and the girls' answers were monosyllabic and cautious. When Garrett finally announced it was time to go, relief was visible on both girls' faces. Bennett stood slowly, looking around the property with an expression that made Caleb's hand drift toward the rifle he kept near the door. "Nice place you've got here, Turner," Bennett said. "Real nice. Must be easy to play family when you've got land and money." "We're not playing," Caleb said evenly. "We're building a life. On stolen ground. With stolen children." The judge disagreed with that assessment. Bennett's smile was ugly. "Judges can be wrong. 6 months, remember? That's all you've got to prove yourselves. And I'll be watching. Every single day." After he left, Lydia found Emma sitting on her bed, silent tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Lydia sat beside her, pulling the girl close. "I don't want to see him anymore. I know he's our papa, but he scares me. He's different now, angry all the time." "I know. I'm sorry you have to see him at all." "Can't you make it stop? Can't you tell the judge we don't want to?" "I wish I could. But the law says he has a right to see you, as long as the marshal is there to make sure everyone stays safe." "It's not fair." "No, it's not. A lot of things in life aren't fair. But you know what is fair? You get to live here now, with people who love you. You get to go to sleep without being afraid. That's more fair than what you had before." Emma nodded against her shoulder. "I love you, Mama Lydia." The title, spoken so naturally now, made Lydia's heart swell. "I love you too, sweet girl, more than you could possibly know." As autumn deepened into early winter, life settled into a comfortable pattern. Caleb taught the girls to help with ranch work appropriate to their ages, gathering eggs, feeding chickens, helping mend fences. Lydia established a routine of morning lessons, teaching them reading and arithmetic at the kitchen table while bread rose and stew simmered. In the evenings, they would gather by the fire. Sometimes Caleb would tell stories about his travels out west. Sometimes Lydia would read aloud from books Mrs. Patterson loaned them. Sometimes they would simply sit in companionable silence, the girls playing quietly while the adults worked on their own tasks. It was during one of these quiet evenings that Lydia felt the first wave of nausea. She'd been feeling off for days, tired, queasy, her body strange and unfamiliar. She'd attributed it to stress and the adjustment of marriage. But when the nausea persisted into the second week, understanding dawned with a mixture of joy and terror. She waited until the girls were asleep before telling Caleb. He was reading by lamplight, and she sat beside him, taking the book gently from his hands. "I need to tell you something," she said. He looked at her, concern immediately creasing his face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. At least, I don't think so." She took a breath. "I think I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Caleb's expression went through a series of rapid changes, surprise, wonder, and finally a joy so pure it brought tears to Lydia's eyes. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing Doc Pritchard. All the signs are there." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could feel his heart pounding against her cheek. That's wonderful, isn't it? You're happy about this?" "I'm terrified and thrilled in equal measure. Another child, Caleb. Another person depending on us to keep them safe and fed and loved. We can do it. We are doing it." "But what about the hearing? What if the judge sees this as instability, another change, another complication? Or he'll see it as exactly what it is, a family growing stronger, a home becoming more permanent." He pulled back to look at her. "This is good news, Lydia. The best news. Don't let fear steal the joy from it." She nodded, letting herself feel the happiness beneath the worry. A baby. Their baby. A child who would be born into love and stability, who would never know the fear and uncertainty that had marked Emma and Sarah's early years. The next day, she rode to town with Caleb to see Doc Pritchard. The doctor confirmed what she already knew. She was about 2 months along, the baby due in late spring. "You're healthy, and the pregnancy appears normal," Pritchard said. "But you need to take care of yourself, rest when you're tired. Eat well. No heavy lifting. I have a ranch to help run and 2 girls to care for." "Then let your husband and those girls help you. Pregnancy isn't a sickness, but it's not something to ignore either." As they left the doctor's office, Lydia felt lighter than she had in weeks. The secret was shared now, real and acknowledged. They stopped at the general store for supplies, and Mrs. Patterson noticed immediately. "You're glowing," the older woman said. "Either you're deliriously happy or—" Her eyes widened. "Oh, my stars, you're expecting!" Lydia's blush confirmed it. Mrs. Patterson pulled her into a fierce hug. "That's wonderful news. Congratulations to you both." Then her expression sobered, "Though I suppose Bennett won't be pleased to hear it. Bennett doesn't get a say in our family planning." "No, but he'll use it if he can. You know that, don't you? He'll claim you're unfit to care for his girls if you're focused on a new baby." The thought had occurred to Lydia, but hearing it spoken aloud made it more real, more frightening. "Then we'll prove him wrong," Caleb said firmly. "We'll show the judge that love doesn't divide, it multiplies. Those girls will be wonderful big sisters." They told Emma and Sarah that evening. Both girls were ecstatic, immediately planning what they would teach the baby and arguing good-naturedly over whether they wanted a brother or sister. "Either way," Emma declared solemnly, "we'll protect them, the way you protected us." Lydia had to turn away to hide her tears. Bennett's second visit came in November, just as the first snow began to fall. He arrived sober again, but there was a hardness to him that hadn't been there before. A calculation. Garrett noticed it too, staying closer than usual to the girls. It was Sarah who innocently revealed the pregnancy. "Mama Lydia has a baby in her tummy," she announced proudly. "We're going to be big sisters." Bennett's face went through a transformation. Shock, then fury, then a cold satisfaction that made Lydia's blood run cold. "Is that so?" he said quietly. "How convenient. You replace my wife with my children, and now you're starting a whole new family to replace them with." "That's not what's happening," Lydia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Isn't it? You think the judge is going to look kindly on this? A pregnant woman trying to care for children who aren't hers? You'll be too distracted, too exhausted. You won't be able to give my girls the attention they need." "That's enough," Garrett interrupted. "Your time's up, Bennett." 5 more months, Bennett said, his eyes locked on Lydia's. "That's all you've got, and now I know exactly what argument to make." After he left, Lydia sank into a chair, her hands shaking. Caleb knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "Don't let him get to you. He's grasping at straws." "Is he? What if he's right? What if the judge sees this as proof we can't handle the responsibility?" "Then the judge is a fool, but I don't think he is. I think he'll see a family that's growing and thriving despite everything Bennett's tried to do to tear us apart." The winter months were hard in ways Lydia hadn't anticipated. The pregnancy sapped her energy, and the cold weather made even simple tasks exhausting. But Emma and Sarah rose to the challenge, taking on more responsibilities without being asked. Emma learned to cook simple meals under Lydia's guidance. Sarah kept the house tidy and helped with laundry. Caleb watched his wife and the girls with growing admiration. They'd become a unit, working together seamlessly, supporting each other through difficulties. This was what family looked like. Not blood or law, but choice and commitment and love freely given. Bennett's monthly visits grew increasingly tense. He would arrive looking for any sign of neglect or inadequacy. The house not clean enough, the girls not properly dressed. Lydia too tired or sick to give them proper attention. Each time he found nothing to justify his complaints, but that didn't stop him from making notes, building his case for the final hearing. In February, a letter arrived from the courthouse. The final custody hearing was scheduled for March 15th, exactly 6 months from the judge's original ruling. Lydia read the letter with trembling hands. "That's just 2 weeks after the baby is due. Caleb, I'll still be recovering. I won't be able to. We'll ask for a postponement, medical reasons. The judge will understand." But when Douglas, their lawyer, tried to file for a delay, the request was denied. Bennett's lawyer had argued that they'd had 6 months to prepare, and pregnancy was a natural condition, not a disability. The judge agreed. "This isn't fair," Lydia said, pacing the cabin despite Caleb's attempts to make her rest. "He's stacking everything against us." "Then we'll overcome it. We've beaten worse odds than this." "Have we? Or have we just been lucky so far?" Caleb caught her hands, stopping her restless movement. "Listen to me. We have something Bennett will never have. We have love. We have a home built on choice and respect, not obligation and bitterness. Those girls adore you. Anyone can see how they've flourished under your care. The judge isn't blind. He'll see it too." "I hope you're right." March arrived with early warmth, melting the last of the winter snow and bringing the first green shoots of spring. Lydia's belly had grown round and prominent, the baby active and strong. She felt ungainly and exhausted, but also more content than she could remember being. Despite the looming hearing, despite Bennett's threats, she had moments of pure happiness that took her breath away. The baby came on March 10th, 5 days before the hearing. Lydia woke in the pre-dawn darkness with the first contraction. She lay quiet for a moment, uncertain. Then another wave came, and she knew. She touched Caleb's shoulder. "It's time." He was awake instantly. "The baby?" "Yes, send for Dr. Pritchard and Mrs. Patterson. I'll need her help." While Caleb rode for help, Emma and Sarah woke and clustered around Lydia anxiously. "Is the baby coming?" Emma asked. "Yes, sweetheart. Probably won't be here until this afternoon, though. Babies take their time." She managed a smile despite the discomfort. "I need you two to be very brave and very helpful today. Can you do that?" They nodded solemnly. By the time Pritchard and Mrs. Patterson arrived, Lydia's contractions were coming regularly. The doctor examined her and nodded approval. "Everything's progressing normally. You're young and healthy. This should go smoothly, but it'll take time. First babies usually do." Mrs. Patterson shooed everyone out of the bedroom. "Mr. Turner, you take those girls outside and keep them busy. This is women's work." Caleb looked torn between obeying and staying by Lydia's side. She made the decision for him. "Go. I'll be fine. Take care of the girls." He kissed her forehead, then herded Emma and Sarah outside. Through the window, Lydia could see him trying to engage them in ranch chores, but they kept glancing toward the house anxiously. The labor was long and difficult. Afternoon faded into evening, and still the baby hadn't come. Pritchard grew concerned as Lydia's strength began to flag. "You need to push harder," he urged. "The baby's almost here, but you have to help." "I can't," Lydia gasped. "I'm too tired." "Yes, you can." Mrs. Patterson gripped her hand. "You're the strongest woman I know, Lydia Turner. You've survived everything life has thrown at you. You can do this too." Drawing on reserves she didn't know she possessed, Lydia bore down with the next contraction. And the next. And finally, as the sun set and painted the room in gold and crimson light, a baby's cry filled the air. It's a boy, Pritchard announced, placing the squalling infant on Lydia's chest. A healthy, perfect boy. Lydia looked down at her son, red-faced and furious, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in outrage. Love flooded through her so intensely it was almost painful. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome home." Caleb was allowed in moments later, Emma and Sarah crowding behind him. They all stood around the bed, staring at the newest member of their family with awe. "He's so small," Sarah breathed. "He's beautiful," Emma added. "What should we name him?" Caleb asked, his voice rough with emotion. Lydia thought for a moment. "James, after my father. James Turner." "James," Caleb repeated, testing the name. He touched the baby's tiny hand, and James immediately gripped his finger. "Welcome to the family, son." The next few days passed in a haze of exhaustion and overwhelming love. Lydia barely slept between feeding James and recovering from the birth. The girls helped where they could, fetching water and keeping the house running. Caleb took over all the ranch work while also caring for his new family. But underneath the joy, dread grew. The hearing was in 2 days, and Lydia was in no condition to appear before a judge. She could barely stand for more than a few minutes without exhaustion overwhelming her. "We'll ask for another postponement," Caleb insisted. "They can't make you appear when you've just given birth. Bennett will claim it's a ploy, that we planned it this way. Let him claim whatever he wants. You need to recover." But Douglas brought bad news when he visited the next day. The judge denied the postponement request. Says 6 months was plenty of time, and if Mrs. Turner can't appear, he'll make his ruling based on the evidence already presented. "That's insane!" Caleb exploded. "She just had a baby 2 days ago." "I know, I argued that. But Bennett's lawyer convinced the judge that this is exactly the kind of instability he's been warning about. Mrs. Turner, unable to fulfill her responsibilities because of her condition." Lydia felt tears of frustration and exhaustion slip down her cheeks. "So we lose. After everything, we lose because I dared to have a child. We don't lose yet," Douglas said. "I'll make the argument without you if I have to. We have 6 months of evidence. Doc Pritchard's testimony about the girls' improved health, statements from neighbors about the stable home you've provided, the girls' own school progress. It's not over." The day of the hearing, Lydia insisted on attending despite Pritchard's protests and Caleb's concerns. "I have to be there," she said, struggling to dress herself with shaking hands. "If I'm not, Bennett wins by default. He gets to paint me as too weak, too incompetent. I won't give him that satisfaction." Mrs. Patterson came to help, bringing a dress that would accommodate Lydia's post-pregnancy body and taking charge of James, who would stay behind with her husband. "You're one of the bravest women I've ever met," Mrs. Patterson said as she helped Lydia into the wagon. "Don't let anyone make you doubt that." The courthouse was packed again, the scandal-hungry crowd even larger than before. Lydia walked in on Caleb's arm, every step an effort, her body screaming in protest. But she held her head high and her back straight, refusing to show weakness. Bennett's eyes lit with triumph when he saw her, pale, obviously struggling, barely able to stand. This was exactly what he'd been hoping for. Judge Harrison frowned when he saw Lydia's condition. "Mrs. Turner, are you certain you're well enough to be here?" "I'm here to fight for my family, Your Honor. That makes me well enough." The hearing began with Bennett's lawyer presenting his case. He painted a picture of chaos and instability, a hasty marriage, a new pregnancy, a household struggling to manage even basic responsibilities. "The evidence is clear," Whitmore argued. "Mrs. Turner, however well-intentioned, has taken on more than she can handle. She's exhausted, overwhelmed, and unable to give my client's daughters the attention they deserve. Meanwhile, Mr. Bennett has spent these 6 months improving his circumstances. He's maintained sobriety, repaired his ranch, and demonstrated his commitment to being a proper father." Douglas countered with their evidence. Pritchard testified that Emma and Sarah had both gained healthy weight, showed no signs of neglect or abuse, and were thriving emotionally. The local schoolteacher, whom Douglas had subpoenaed, testified that both girls had made remarkable educational progress and spoke glowingly of their home life. Mackenzie and other neighbors testified about the stable, loving household Caleb and Lydia had created. Marshal Garrett noted that he'd received no complaints about the Turner household, while Bennett had been arrested twice more for public drunkenness since the original hearing. Then it was time for the girls themselves to testify. Emma went first, looking small and frightened in the witness chair. The judge spoke gently to her. Emma, I need you to answer some questions honestly. You're not in trouble, and you can tell me the truth without fear. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Do you want to live with your father or with Mr. and Mrs. Turner? Emma's voice was clear and unwavering. With Mama Lydia and Papa Caleb. Why? Because they love us. They take care of us. They make us feel safe. She looked directly at Bennett, and Lydia saw courage beyond her years in that gaze. My real papa drinks and gets angry. He scares us. He doesn't make us feel safe at all. That's a lie, Bennett shouted, jumping to his feet. She's been poisoned against me. They've turned my own daughter. Mr. Bennett, sit down, the judge ordered sharply. I will not tolerate outbursts in my courtroom. Sarah's testimony was similar, though delivered with less confidence. But her meaning was clear. She wanted to stay with Lydia and Caleb, wanted to be part of the family they'd built. Finally, Lydia herself took the stand. She was so weak she had to grip the chair arms to keep from swaying, but her voice remained steady as she answered Douglas's questions. Mrs. Turner, Mr. Bennett's lawyer has suggested you're overwhelmed and unable to properly care for his daughters. How do you respond? I respond that caring for children is never easy, whether you've just given birth or not. But love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up every day, even when you're tired. It's about putting their needs first, their safety first, their happiness first. That's what I've done for 6 months, and that's what I'll continue to do for the rest of my life. Are you able to care for 3 children? I already am caring for 3 children. With my husband's help, with the community's support, and with the girls' own capable assistance, we're making it work. We're not just surviving, we're thriving. Whitmore's cross-examination was merciless. He pressed her on every detail, her exhaustion, her medical condition, her ability to give equal attention to all 3 children. By the time he was finished, Lydia was trembling with fatigue and barely able to focus. The judge called for a brief recess. Caleb helped Lydia outside, where she nearly collapsed against the courthouse wall. I can't do this, she whispered. I'm going to pass out. You've already done it. You were magnificent. Now we just have to wait for the ruling. When they were called back inside, Judge Harrison looked over his notes for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he spoke. I've reviewed all the evidence presented over these 6 months. I've heard testimony from medical professionals, neighbors, law enforcement, educators, and the children themselves. And I've seen firsthand the dedication both parties have shown. He paused, and Lydia's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Mr. Bennett, I acknowledge your efforts to improve your circumstances. You have maintained better sobriety, though not perfect sobriety. You have made repairs to your property. But I must balance these improvements against the clear testimony of your daughters who have expressed fear of returning to your care. Bennett's face darkened. Mrs. Turner, I acknowledge the challenges you've faced and will continue to face with a newborn infant. But I've also seen evidence of a stable, loving home where Emma and Sarah have flourished in ways they never did under their father's sole care. The judge's gaze moved between them. Therefore, I am granting full custody of Emma and Sarah Bennett to Mr. and Mrs. Caleb Turner, with the option to legally adopt should they choose to pursue that avenue. Mr. Bennett, your parental rights are not terminated, but your visitation will remain supervised and limited to once every 3 months, unless you can demonstrate sustained sobriety for a period of no less than 1 year. The courtroom erupted. Bennett was shouting, his lawyer trying to calm him. Lydia couldn't hear anything over the roaring in her ears. They'd won. They'd actually won. Emma and Sarah, who'd been waiting outside with Mrs. Patterson, were brought in. When they heard the news, both girls burst into tears and threw themselves at Lydia and Caleb. We get to stay? Emma asked through her sobs. Forever? Forever, Lydia confirmed, holding both girls as tightly as her weakened state allowed. You're ours, completely, and forever. Bennett tried to approach them, but Marshal Garrett blocked his path. Not today, Bennett. Let them have this moment. For once, Bennett seemed to truly see what he'd lost. Not property or possessions, but daughters who'd needed love and safety more than he'd been able to provide. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment he looked less angry than utterly defeated. Take care of them, he said, so quietly Lydia almost missed it. Then he turned and walked out of the courthouse, and out of their lives. The weeks that followed were a blur of adjustment and joy. The legal adoption process began, changing Emma and Sarah's last name to Turner officially. James grew stronger each day, his presence completing the family in ways Lydia hadn't known were possible. Spring arrived in full force, bringing warm days and the promise of new growth. Caleb expanded the garden, and the girls helped plant vegetables and flowers. They talked about adding a room onto the cabin, maybe even building a proper farmhouse eventually. One evening in late April, Lydia stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and pink. Emma and Sarah were playing with James on a blanket in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. Caleb came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That day at the train depot. When I stepped off the train and saw you standing there. I thought my life was over, that I'd made the worst mistake possible coming to Kansas. And now? Now I think it was the best mistake I ever made, because it brought me here, to you, to them." She gestured toward the girls and the baby. "To this life I never knew I could have. No regrets? Only that we lost so much time. 18 years we could have had together. We have all the time ahead of us now. That's what matters." She turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, Caleb Turner. Not because you rescued me or gave me a home, but because you showed me what real love looks like. Patient and kind and strong enough to weather any storm. I love you too, from that first kiss by the creek to right now and every moment in between, even when you were gone. I loved you then. I love you now. And I'll love you until the day I die." They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon. Two people who'd found their way back to each other against all odds. Around them, the prairie whispered its secrets to the gathering darkness. In the yard, the children played, safe and loved, and exactly where they belonged. Years later, people would tell stories about the mail-order bride who became something more, about the cowboy who'd frozen at the depot when he saw his first love step off the train, about the family they'd built from broken pieces and desperate hope. Some of the stories would be true, some exaggerated, but all of them would carry the same essential truth. Love, when it's real and fought for and chosen every single day, can overcome anything. Distance, time, circumstances, fear, even the law itself. And sometimes when fate offers you a second chance at the life you were always meant to live, the bravest thing you can do is reach out and take it with both hands. On that porch in the fading light, with his wife in his arms and his children's laughter filling the air, Caleb Turner understood that truth in his bones. The moment he'd seen Lydia step off that train had changed everything, not just for him, but for all of them. It had led them here, to this moment, to this life they'd built together. And it was more than he'd ever dared to dream possible. The prairie night settled in, stars emerging one by one in the darkening sky. Inside the cabin, lamplight glowed warm and welcoming. A family sat down to dinner together, sharing food and stories and the comfortable rhythms of home. Outside, the wind carried the scent of growing things and distant rain. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. There was always work to be done, problems to solve, a future to build. But tonight, there was only this: love, safety, and the unshakable certainty that they belonged to each other. Forever had seemed like an impossible promise when Lydia first spoke her vows. Now, watching her husband play with their son while the girls set the table, forever felt like exactly the right amount of time, not nearly long enough to hold all the love she felt, but it would have to do. And it was enough, more than enough. It was everything.